One day after my son's wedding, the restaurant manager called me and said, "We rechecked the security camera footage and you need to see this yourself. Please come alone and do not tell your wife anything." I thought my son had forgotten his wallet, or maybe there was a billing error with the $80,000 tab I had just paid. I never imagined that I was about to watch my new daughter-in-law pour a $500 bottle of wine onto the floor while laughing about how long it would take for my wife to die. That was the moment I realized I had not just paid for a wedding, I had paid for our own execution. But what they did not know was that this old man still had a few wars left in him. If you have ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, tell me your story in the comments and subscribe for more. The silence in my living room felt heavier than usual that Sunday morning. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears after a loud explosion. The explosion had been the wedding of my only son Jamal to Chloe Sterling. It was a spectacle of white roses, imported silk, and crystal flutes that cost more than my first car. I sat in my worn-out leather recliner, the one Ruth had been begging me to throw out for 10 years, and stared at the ledger open on my lap. The numbers danced in front of my tired eyes, mocking me. $80,000. That was the final tally. I took my reading glasses off and rubbed the bridge of my nose, feeling the rough skin of my fingers. These hands had built bridges and poured concrete foundations all over Atlanta for 40 years. They were hands that knew the value of a dollar because they had bled for every single one. And in one night, I had signed away a chunk of our peace of mind for a party. My wife, Ruth, walked into the room humming a tune from the reception. She looked frail but happy, her eyes still shining with the memory of seeing our boy standing at the altar. She was holding a cup of herbal tea, her hands shaking just a little. The doctors said her heart was weak, that she needed calm and stability. That was why I never told her about the real cost of the wedding. I told her we had plenty. I told her the investments were doing fine. I lied. "It was a fairy tale, Otis," she said, smiling at me. "Did you see how happy Jamal looked? And Chloe looked like an angel. She is going to take such good care of him." I forced a smile that felt like cracking dried mud. "She did look beautiful, Ruth. It was a good night." I closed the ledger and slid it under the stack of magazines on the side table. I could not let her see the red ink. I could not let her know that the diversified portfolio I had built was taking a hit because Jamal wanted to impress a family that looked at us like we were the help. The Sterling, Chloe's parents. They had sat on the groom's side because they said the lighting was better smiling with their capped teeth and drinking the premium scotch I paid for. They had not contributed a dime, not a single cent. They claimed their assets were temporarily frozen due to a complex international banking error. I knew a hustle when I saw one, but for Jamal's sake and for Ruth's heart, I had kept my mouth shut. I was just doing the mental math, calculating how many months of austerity we would need to recover when the phone rang. It was the landline, a sound that always made me jump. I picked it up, expecting a telemarketer or maybe a relative calling to congratulate us. "Hello," I said, my voice raspy from a lack of sleep. "Otis, is that you?" The voice was low, urgent, and familiar. It was Dino, the manager of the Gilded Oak, the venue where we had the reception. Dino and I went back 30 years. We served in the same unit overseas. He was a man who had seen things that would turn your hair white, and he was not the type to panic, but his voice was trembling. "Dino," I said, sitting up straighter. "What is wrong? Did the check bounce? I transferred the funds this morning." "No, Otis, the money is fine. Listen to me carefully. Are you alone?" I looked at Ruth, who was busy watering her ferns by the window, humming that same song. "I can talk," I said, keeping my voice even. "What is going on? You need to come down here, now. Come to the back entrance by the loading dock. Do not park in the front. And Otis, this is the most important part. Do not bring Ruth. Do not tell her where you are going. Do not tell Jamal." My stomach dropped. A cold sensation spread through my chest. Dino sounded like we were back in the jungle on patrol. "Is Jamal okay? Did something happen after we left?" "Otis, just come. It is about the security footage. We were doing the standard review for liability, and I found something. You need to see this with your own eyes. It involves the family. That is all I can say over the phone." He hung up before I could ask another question. I sat there holding the receiver, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Security footage. Family. My mind raced through the worst-case scenario. Did Jamal get into a fight? Was he caught doing drugs? Did he cheat on Chloe on his wedding? "Otis, who was that?" Ruth asked, turning around. "You look pale. Is everything all right?" I stood up quickly, hiding the tremor in my hands. "It was just the pharmacy, Ruth. They messed up my prescription for the blood pressure meds. They said I need to come down there personally to sign some waiver before they close early today. Bureaucracy. You know how it is." Ruth frowned, concern etching lines into her forehead. "On a Sunday? That is strange. Do you want me to come with you? We could stop for lunch." "No," I said too quickly. I softened my tone, walking over to kiss her on the forehead. "You rest. You did too much dancing yesterday. Your heart needs a break. I will be back in an hour." I grabbed my keys and walked out the door before she could ask any more questions. I climbed into my 2004 Ford F-150. It was a beat beat-up truck with fading blue paint and a rusted bumper. Jamal hated it. He begged me to buy a luxury sedan, something that fit the image of a successful father. But I loved this truck. It was honest. It ran on diesel and grit just like me. I fired up the engine and backed out of the driveway, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned gray. The drive to the Gilded Oak took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. My mind was playing tricks on me. I kept thinking about the wedding. The way Chloe's father, Richard Sterling, had slapped me on the back a little too hard and called me a credit to my people. The way Chloe's mother, Veronica, had inspected the silverware as if looking for dirt. I had swallowed every microaggression. I had played the role of the quiet, retired maintenance worker just to keep the peace. I never told them I owned 3 logistics warehouses in the industrial district. I never told them I was a civil structural engineer before I retired. To them, I was just a checkbook with legs. I pulled into the service alley behind the restaurant. The dumpsters were overflowing with the remnants of last night's excess. Wilted flowers, half-eaten cakes, empty bottles of champagne. It looked like a graveyard of expensive dreams. Dino was waiting for me by the steel door smoking a cigarette. He had quit smoking 10 years ago. Seeing him with a cigarette now scared me more than anything else. He threw the butt on the ground and crushed it with his heel when he saw me. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a handshake. He just opened the heavy door and motioned for me to follow. We walked through this kitchen which smelled of bleach and stale grease. The staff was gone. It was just the hum of the refrigerators and the echo of our footsteps. Dino led me into a small windowless room in the back, the security office. It was cramped, filled with monitors and blinking lights. "Sit down, Otis," Dino said, pointing to a rolling chair. I remained standing. "Dino, what is this about? If Jamal did something stupid, I will pay for it. You know I will." "It is not," Jamal, Dino said quietly. He sat down at the desk and typed a password into the computer, or at least not directly. He pulled up a file. The timestamp on the video read 11:15 p.m. the previous night. That was 45 minutes after Ruth and I had left the reception. We had gone home early because Ruth was feeling faint. The party was still raging when we left. The camera angle showed the wine cellar. It was a restricted area where the restaurant kept its vintage reserves. The lighting was dim, but the high-definition camera captured everything clearly. 3 people walked into the frame. My breath caught in my throat. It was Chloe. She was still in her wedding dress, the white lace trailing on the dusty floor, but she did not look like the blushing bride anymore. Her hair was messy, and she was holding a bottle of wine by the neck, swinging it like a club. Behind her were her parents, Richard and Veronica Sterling. I leaned in closer to the screen, squinting. "What are they doing in there?" I whispered. "Just watch," Dino said. He reached over and turned up the volume on the speakers. The audio was crisp. They must have been standing right under one of the microphones. "I cannot believe we pulled it off," Chloe said. Her voice was slurred. She was drunk, but it was a mean drunk, a sharp, vicious tone I had never heard from her before. She laughed a sound that made my skin crawl. "Did you see the old man's face when he signed the check? He actually thanked me for letting him pay." I watched as Richard Sterling grabbed a bottle from the shelf. He looked at the label, Chateau Margaux. He whistled. "This is $1,000 a bottle. Do you think the old fool would notice if we took a crate home? He will notice everything and do nothing," Veronica replied, leaning against a wine barrel. She kicked off her heels and rubbed her feet. "He is too afraid of losing Jamal. That boy is wrapped around your finger, Chloe. It is pathetic." On the screen, Chloe uncorked the bottle she was holding. She didn't pour it into a glass. She tilted her head back and took a massive swig wine, spilling down her chin and onto the expensive dress I had paid for. "He is not just wrapped around my finger, Mom," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "He is on a leash, and the best part is the old man thinks he is protecting his legacy. He has no idea I already convinced Jamal to talk to him about the house. The house." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. My house. The one I built with my own hands 30 years ago. The one Ruth loved more than anything in the world. "Which house?" Richard asked, laughing. "The shack they live in. It is sitting on 2 acres of prime development land," Dad, Chloe said. She took another drink. I looked up the zoning. "If we bulldoze that piece of junk, we can sell the land to developers for a fortune. Or build a real mansion, not that dusty museum they live in." I felt a sharp pain in my chest like a rib had cracked. They were talking about bulldozing my life. "But what about the mother?" Veronica asked. "Ruth, she seems clingy. She will never agree to sell." Chloe snorted. She looked directly at the camera, not knowing I was watching her 12 hours later. She smiled a cruel, twisted smile. "Ruth is a ticking time bomb. Did you see her panting after one dance? Her heart is garbage. I give her 6 months, maybe less if we add a little stress." The room spun. I had to grab the edge of the desk to keep from falling. She was talking about my wife, my Ruth. Chloe tipped the bottle upside down and watched the dark red wine pour onto the concrete floor, splashing over her shoe. "Oops," she giggled. "Put it on Otis's tab." Dino paused the video. The image froze on Chloe's face, distorted by laughter and malice. The silence in the security room was suffocating. I stared at the frozen image, unable to speak. My throat felt like it was full of broken glass. "Otis," Dino said softly, "I am sorry. I debated showing you this, but when I heard them talking about your wife, I couldn't let you you walk into a trap. I took a deep breath, forcing air into my lung. I straightened my back. The shock was fading, replaced by something colder, something harder. Is there more? I asked, my voice sounding like gravel. Dino nodded. There is another clip from 10 minutes later. Jamal comes in. Show me. Dino clicked the mouse. The video resumed. The door opened and my son walked in. He looked disheveled, his tie undone. He saw the wine on the floor and his new wife drinking from the bottle. Chloe, he said, his voice slurring slightly. We should get back. People are looking for us. Chloe turned on him. She didn't look at him with love. She looked at him with contempt. Shut up, Jamal. I am celebrating. Your dad just paid for my freedom. Jamal looked at her parents, then at the floor. But Mom and Dad, they really stretched for this. We should be grateful. Chloe stepped forward and slapped him. The sound was loud even through the speakers. It was a sharp, vicious slap. Jamal didn't hit back. He didn't yell. He just flinched and lowered his head. Do not ever talk to me about being grateful to those people, she hissed. We are the prize, Jamal. I am the prize. You are lucky I even looked at you. Now grab a case of this wine and carry it to my dad's car. And my son, my boy, who I taught to stand tall and look a man in the eye. He picked up the crate. I closed my eyes. That was enough. I turned to Dino. Can I get a copy of this? I already put it on a flash drive for you, Dino said, handing me a small silver stick. Otis, what are you going to do? I took the drive and put it in my pocket. It felt heavy like a loaded gun. I am going to go home, I said, walking toward the door. I am going to give Ruth her medicine. And then I am going to teach these people a lesson they will never forget. I walked out of the restaurant and into the blinding midday sun. I climbed into my old truck and sat there for a moment staring at the steering wheel. They wanted a war. They wanted to bulldoze my house and bury my wife. They thought I was just a senile old man with a checkbook. I started the engine. The diesel motor roared to life, a deep, angry sound. I pulled my phone out and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It was a private investigator I knew from the old days, a man who could find dirt on a saint. Vance, I said when he answered. It's Otis King. I have a job for you. I need you to dig into the Sterling family. I want to know everything. Every debt, every lie, every secret. And Vance, dig deep. I think I am going to need a shovel. I sat frozen in that cramped security office, and the air felt like it had been sucked out of the room. On the screen, the footage continued to play, but the sound of my own heartbeat was pounding so loud in my ears I could barely hear Dino breathing next to me. I watched the woman my son had just married, the woman Ruth had called an angel, as she stood in the center of the wine cellar. She was holding a crystal glass filled with a dark red liquid. It was the Chateau Margaux, the vintage bottle I had specifically ordered for the head table, a bottle that cost more than my first month of wages back when I started working construction. Chloe was not sipping. She was holding it out at arm's length, her face twisted into a sneer that made her look unrecognizable. With a flick of her wrist, she poured the wine onto the concrete floor. She watched it splash and pool around her white satin shoes, and then she laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that cut through the silence of the security room like a knife. Oops, she said to the camera, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I guess my hand slipped, just like old Otis's grip on his wallet is going to slip. I felt a muscle jump in my jaw. I remembered that wine. I remembered the sommelier asking if I was sure about the price, and me nodding because I wanted everything to be perfect for them. I wanted them to have the best start possible. And here she was, pouring my hard work into the dirt just for the sport of it. Beside her, Richard Sterling was leaning against a wine rack inspecting a cigar he had pulled from his pocket. He lit it, ignoring the no smoking signs, and blew a cloud of smoke toward the camera. You really think he bought it? Richard asked, his voice rough and dismissive. Chloe turned to her father, a triumphant grin on her face. Hook, line, and sinker, Dad. That old man is so stupid it is almost painful. Do you remember those papers I brought over last week? The ones I told him were for a supplemental life insurance policy to protect Ruth. I remembered. I closed my eyes for a second, and the memory washed over me. Chloe had come to the house on a Tuesday morning wearing a modest floral dress, holding a folder of documents. She had sat at our kitchen table, holding Ruth's hand, looking so concerned, so loving. She said she had a friend in insurance who got us a special rate. She said she just wanted to make sure Ruth was taken care of if anything happened to me. I had been so touched. I had signed where she pointed, barely reading the fine print because I trusted her. I thought I was gaining a daughter. On the screen, Chloe took a step closer to her father, her eyes gleaming with malice. He signed them Dad. He didn't even read the second page. He thought he was securing Ruth's future, but he actually signed a limited power of attorney over his property asset. He gave me the authority to manage the real estate portfolio in case of his incapacitation. Richard laughed, a deep belly laugh that made his expensive suit jacket strain against his chest. Incapacitation, he chuckled. That is a broad term, honey. A very broad term. Exactly, Chloe said, pouring another glass of wine just to spill it again. All we need is a doctor to say he is slipping a little, maybe getting a bit senile, and I can start liquidating. We will have the deed to that warehouse block before the honeymoon is over. I felt sick, physically sick. My stomach churned with a mix of rage and shame. I prided myself on being sharp. I prided myself on being a man who read the blueprints before he laid a single brick, but they had played me. They had used my love for my wife, my greatest weakness, against me. But what about Jamal? Richard asked, taking a drag from his cigar. Is he going to be a problem? He seems to have a soft spot for the old man. Chloe waved her hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. Jamal is a puppet. I pull the strings and he dances. He is so desperate to keep me happy he would sell his own soul. Besides, I have the ultimate ace up my sleeve. She paused for dramatic effect, placing a hand on her flat stomach. I just have to tell them I am pregnant, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Just a little lie about a grandbaby on the way. You know how obsessed they are with legacy. If I tell Otis I need the house in my name to secure the baby's future, he will hand it over with a bow on top. My hands clenched into fists on my knees, so tight my fingernails dug into my palm. A baby. Ruth had been knitting yellow booties for weeks, just hoping, just praying for a grandchild. She had talked about it every night. And this woman, this monster, was using our deepest hope as a weapon to rob us. Veronica Sterling stepped into the frame, then pacing nervously. She looked out of place in the dusty cellar, her sequined dress catching the dim light. Well, hurry it up! She snapped, her voice shrill and impatient. I do not want to be tied to this family longer than necessary. It smells like old grease and desperation in their house. I want the money secured so we can get back to our real lives. I am tired of playing nice with these people. These people. The way she said it made my skin crawl. It was the same tone I used to hear on job sites in the 70s, the tone that said, you don't belong here, boy. I thought we had moved past that. I thought money and success had bought me a seat at the table. But to Veronica Sterling, I was just a mark, a resource to be stripped and discarded. Get the cash and let's vanish, Veronica hissed. I can't stand another dinner eating that greasy food they cook. Then the heavy wooden door of the cellar creaked open again. My heart stopped. Jamal walked in. My son, the boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had put through college, the boy I had bailed out of debt more times than I could count. He was still wearing his tuxedo, but his tie was undone, hanging loose around his neck like a noose. He looked sweaty, pale, and terrified. He saw the wine on the floor. He saw the cigar smoke. He saw his new wife and her parents plotting the destruction of his family, and he did nothing. He didn't yell. He didn't throw them out. He just stood there slumped over like a man carrying a weight too heavy to bear. Chloe, he said, his voice weak and pleading, we should go upstairs. People are starting to ask where the bride is. Chloe turned on him, her face shifting from malicious glee to cold anger in a split second. Shut up, Jamal, she spat. I am talking business with my family. You just worry about keeping your mouth shut and looking pretty. Jamal flinched, but he didn't back down completely. He took a step forward, his hand shaking. I heard you talking about the house, he said quietly. You said we wouldn't kick them out right away. You promised. Chloe rolled her eyes. Plans changed, Jamal. Your dad is sitting on a gold mine and he is wasting it. We need that capital. But my mom, Jamal whispered. He looked up at Chloe, his eyes wet with tears. Please, Chloe, do whatever you want with the money. Take the warehouse, take the saving, but don't hurt me. She is sick. This would kill her. I leaned toward the screen, a tiny spark of hope igniting in my chest. My boy. He was weak. He was compromised, but he still loved his mother. Maybe there was still a man in there somewhere. Chloe walked up to him slowly. She looked him up and down with pure disgust. She reached out a hand and I thought she was going to caress his cheek. Instead, she slapped him. It was harder than the slap I had seen earlier. It was a backhand that snapped his head to the side. Jamal stumbled back, clutching his cheek. Do not tell me what to do, she hissed, stepping into his space until she was nose to nose with him. Your mother is a burden, Jamal. She is a drain on resources. She grabbed his lapels and shook him. Honestly, she said, her voice dropping to a terrifying calm, if she died of a heart attack next week, it would be the best thing for everyone. Think of the money we would save on hospital bills. Think of how much faster we could get the inheritance. The room went silent. Even Richard and Veronica looked a little shocked by the venom in her voice. Jamal stood there, his cheek red from her hand, his eyes wide with horror. He looked at his wife, and for a second I saw the realization hit him. He saw what I was seeing. He saw the monster. But then he looked down, he swallowed, and he nodded. Okay, he whispered. Okay, Chloe, just let's go upstairs. He turned and walked out of the cellar, leaving the door open behind him. He left them there. He left us there. Chloe laughed again, a sound that will haunt me until the day I die. She poured the last of the wine onto the floor and dropped the empty bottle, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. Let's go, she said to her parents, stepping over the broken glass. I have a wedding to finish enjoying. The screen went black. Dino had stopped the video. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The hum of the computer fan was the only sound in the room. I stared at the blank monitor, seeing the afterimage of my son bowing his head in submission. I felt a coldness spread through my body, starting in my chest and moving out to my fingertip. It wasn't the cold of fear. It was the cold cold of clarity. I had spent my whole life building things, structures, foundation, a family. I believed that if you used good materials and worked hard, the things you built would stand the test of time. But I had built my house on sand. My son was not the man I thought he was. He was a coward who would watch his wife bury his mother just to keep the peace. And Chloe, the angel, the daughter I never had. She was a predator. She had looked at my wife, my gentle, sick Ruth, and seen nothing but a line item in a budget, a cost to be eliminated. I stood up slowly. My knees creaked, but my legs felt steady. I reached into my pocket and touched the cool metal of the truck key. "Are you okay, Otis?" Dino asked softly. I looked at him. I didn't recognize the voice that came out of my throat. It was deep calm and absolutely devoid of emotion. "I am fine, Dino. You saw what they are planning. They are going to come for everything. Let them come," I said. "Otis." I turned to my old friend. His face was etched with worry. He knew what kind of man I used to be back before the gray hair and the retirement party. He knew what I was capable of when pushed. "They think they are dealing with a senile old man," I said, buttoning my jacket. "They think Jamal is the gatekeeper. They think Ruth is a victim waiting to happen." I walked to the door and placed my hand on the handle. "They forgot who built the gate," I said. I opened the door and stepped out into the kitchen. The noise of the prep cooks chopping vegetables and the clatter of pans washed over me, but I barely heard it. My mind was already miles away. I wasn't just Otis King, the retired engineer, anymore. I was a man with a mission. I walked out to my truck, the sun hitting my face. I didn't feel the warmth. I felt the weight of the flash drive in my pocket, the evidence. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at my hands. They were steady, no tremor, no hesitation. I thought about Ruth waiting at home knitting those yellow booties for a grandchild that didn't exist. I thought about Jamal letting that woman talk about his mother's death like it was a business transaction. I started the engine. I wasn't going home to cry. I wasn't going home to beg my son to leave her. That time had passed. I pulled out of the alley and onto the main road. I drove past the bank. I drove past the lawyer's office. I knew exactly what I had to do. First, I had to protect Ruth. She couldn't know. Not yet. It would kill her. Second, I had to secure the asset. If Chloe had power of attorney, I had to move fast. Third, I had to test Jamal. I had to give him one last chance to be a man, even though I knew in my heart he would fail. And fourth, I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Fourth, I was going to destroy the Sterling family. I was going to take apart their lives brick by brick until there was nothing left but dust. They wanted a heart attack, a heart. They wanted a tragedy. I merged onto the highway, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Be careful what you wish for, Chloe," I whispered to the empty cab of the truck, "because I am coming, and I am bringing the storm with me." I drove home in silence with the radio off because I needed to hear myself think. The flash drive in my pocket felt hot against my leg like a piece of burning coal. Every time I shifted gears in the old Ford, I could feel it there, a hard reminder of the poison spreading through my family. I pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment looking at the house. It was a modest brick ranch built solid on a foundation I poured myself in 1982. To the Sterlings, it was a tear-down, a dusty museum waiting for a bulldozer. To me, it was the only place on earth where I had ever felt safe. I wiped my face with a rough hand, smoothing out the lines of rage that had etched themselves into my skin. I had to put the mask on. I had to become the simple retired man they thought I was. I opened the front door and the smell of Ruth's pot roast hit me. It was a smell that usually meant comfort, but today it just made my stomach turn. Ruth was sitting in her favorite armchair, the one by the window where the light was best. She had her iPad balanced on her knees, swiping through photos from the wedding that people had posted on social media. She looked up when I walked in, her face lighting up with that pure, innocent joy that I had sworn to protect. "Otis, come look at this," she said, waving me over. "Look at how the light hits Chloe's veil. She looks like royalty, doesn't she? And look at Jamal. I have never seen him stand so tall." I walked over and kissed the top of her head, my hand resting on her thin shoulder. I looked at the screen. It was a picture of the two of them at the altar. Chloe was looking up at Jamal with wide, adoring eyes. It was a perfect performance. If I hadn't just seen her pouring wine on the floor and wishing for my wife's death, I would have believed it too. "She is something else, Ruth," I said, my voice steady. "She is definitely something else." Ruth sighed happily, tapping the screen. "I am just so glad he found her. You know I worried about him, Otis. He is so soft-hearted, just like you. He needs a strong woman to look out for him. And her parents seem so sophisticated. I know we don't have much in common with them, but they raised a good girl. A girl with value." I felt a bile rise in my throat. Value. I swallowed it down, forcing it back into the pit of my stomach where I kept all the things I couldn't say. "You take your medicine yet?" I asked, moving toward the kitchen to get her water. "Oh, stop fussing," she said, dismissing me with a wave. "I am fine. My heart is full today, Otis. I feel like I could run a marathon." "Do not joke about that, Ruth." I watched her take the pill, her hand trembling slightly. She was so fragile. A strong wind could knock her over. If I told her what I knew, if I played that video for her right now, it would stop her heart as surely as a bullet. The doctor's words echoed in my head. 6 months, maybe less if we add a little stress. Chloe knew exactly where to strike, so I did what I had done for 40 years. I swallowed the truth. I buried it deep under layers of concrete and steel. I learned how to do this a long time ago, back in the early 70s when when I was the only black man on a foreman crew in downtown Atlanta. Back then, you didn't talk back when the white supervisors called you boy or made jokes about your intelligence. You didn't react when they gave you the most dangerous shifts or shorted your pay. If you reacted, you got fired or worse. So you learned to stand still. You learned to keep your face blank while your blood boiled. You learned to watch and listen and wait. You learned that the man who shouts loses, but the man who plans wins. I built bridges that are still standing today while the men who spit on my boots are dead or forgotten. I knew how to play the long game. I knew how to let people underestimate me until it was too late for them to run. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, my hand steady. I looked out the window at the backyard, at the garden Ruth had planted. I saw the property line, the 2 acres of prime land that Chloe wanted to sell. I will burn this house to the ground before I let you touch it, I whispered to the glass. The evening passed in a blur of fake smiles and forced conversation. I ate the pot roast, tasting nothing but ash. I listened to Ruth talk about potential names for grandchildren that Chloe had no intention of giving her. I nodded and agreed and died a little inside with every lie I told. Around 7 o'clock, headlights swept across the living room window. A car pulled into the driveway aggressively, the tires crunching on the gravel. Who could that be at this hour? Ruth asked, adjusting her glasses. I stood up, walking to the window. I recognized the car. It was a brand new Porsche Cayenne. It still had the temporary tag. It is Jamal and Chloe, I said, feeling my muscles tense. Already, Ruth clapped her hands together. Oh, they must be coming to open gifts with us. How sweet. I didn't say anything. I knew they weren't here to open gifts. I unlocked the front door just as Jamal was reaching for the bell. He looked wrecked. His eyes were red-rimmed and he was sweating despite the cool evening air. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring yet, I noticed. Or maybe he had taken it off. Behind him, Chloe was a vision of distress. She had changed out of her wedding dress into designer jeans and a silk blouse, but her face was blotchy and she was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Mom, Dad, Jamal choked out, stepping into the foyer. I am so sorry to bother you. We didn't know where else to go. Ruth was out of her chair in a second, rushing over to hug them. What is it, baby? What happened? Are you okay? Chloe let out a sob that sounded like a wounded animal. It was a masterful performance. She collapsed into Ruth's arms, burying her face in my wife's shoulder. It is a nightmare, Ruth, she wailed. A complete nightmare. I stood by the door, my arms crossed, leaning against the frame. I watched them with the cold, detached gaze of a structural engineer looking for cracks in a foundation. Come in, I said, my voice flat. Sit down. Tell us what is wrong. We moved to the living room. Chloe sat on the sofa, clutching Jamal's hand so hard her knuckles were white. Jamal looked at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. He knew. He knew what she was doing, and he was letting it happen. It is my father, Chloe said, sniffing. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and wet tears. You know he is a businessman, Otis. He deals with international trade. Complicated thing. I nodded slowly. I know he says he is a businessman. Well, there has been a terrible misunderstanding, she continued. The government, they froze his accounts. All of them. It is a mistake, some clerical error with the overseas transfers, but they locked everything down this afternoon. Ruth gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh my goodness, that is terrible. It gets worse, Jamal mumbled. He sounded like he was reading from a script he hated. Tell them, Jamal, Chloe prompted him, squeezing his hand. Jamal swallowed hard. Mom, Dad, the house they are staying in, the Sterling estate. It turns out it was tied to those accounts. The bank is threatening to seize it tomorrow morning if they don't make a payment. A big payment. Ruth looked confused. But I thought they owned homes all over the world. Why would they lose a house over one missed payment? Chloe jumped in fast. It is leverage, Ruth. The banks use aggressive tactic. They want to embarrass my father. If he gets evicted, the scandal would ruin his reputation. He would lose his business partners. He would lose everything. And she paused, letting a fresh tear roll down her cheek. We co-signed on a loan for them, she lied, to help them out with the liquidity issue last week. If they go down, we go down. They will come after our apartment. They will come after Jamal's car. We will be starting our marriage bankrupt. Ruth was already reaching for her purse. How much, she asked. How much do they need to stop this? I watched Chloe's eyes flick toward me. For a split second, the mask slipped. I saw the greed. I saw the predator sizing up the prey. Then she looked back at Ruth, her expression tragic again. $50,000, she whispered. The air left the room. Ruth froze. $50,000 was a fortune to her. It was more than she had made in 5 years at the library. 50,000, she repeated, her voice faint. Oh, honey, we don't have that kind of money lying around, do we, Otis? She turned to me, looking for confirmation, looking for me to fix it. I looked at Chloe. I looked at Jamal. 50,000, I said, slowly testing the weight of the number. That is a lot of cash. It is just a loan, Chloe said quickly, leaning forward. Just for a week, maybe 2. As soon as the accounts are unfrozen, my dad will pay you back double. He insists on it. He is so ashamed, Otis. He wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death. Life or death, I thought. Like my wife's heart. I scratched my chin, pretending to think. I remembered the conversation in the wine cellar. The old man is so stupid, it is almost painful. They thought I was a mark. They thought they could waltz in here 24 hours after I paid for their party and rob me blind. I have some savings, I said quietly. Ruth looked at me surprised. You do? From the old days I lied. An emergency fund. I kept it in cash mostly. I don't trust banks. Chloe's eyes lit up. I saw the calculation happening behind her tears. She was already spent. Oh, Dad, she said, using that word like a weapon. You would save us. You would literally save our lives. I stood up and walked over to the old iron safe in the corner of the room. It was hidden behind a bookshelf, but everyone knew it was there. I kept deeds in there, birth certificates, and yes, some cash. Not 50,000, but enough to make it look convincing. I spun the dial, feeling their eyes on my back. I could feel Chloe's hunger. It was a physical thing, filling the room like a bad smell. I opened the heavy door and reached inside. I pulled out a metal box. I can give you the money, I said, turning around. Chloe let out a breath she had been holding. Jamal looked like he was about to be sick, but I continued holding the box tight against my chest. There is a condition. Anything, Chloe said. Anything, Otis. I want collateral. The room went silent. Chloe's smile faltered. Collateral, she asked. Yes, business is business, right, Chloe? Your father is a businessman. He understands. If I lend you $50,000 of my retirement money, I need to know I am getting it back. But we are family, she said, her voice sharpening just a fraction. Don't you trust us? I trust numbers, I said. And I trust security. What do you want? Jamal asked, his voice hoarse. I want the title to your car, I said, pointing out the window at the Porsche. And I want a promissory note signed by you and Chloe stating that if the money isn't returned in 30 days, I own that car, and I have a lien on your future earnings. Chloe bristled. That car is a lease. She lied. I knew it wasn't. I had seen the paperwork when Jamal left it on the counter last week. He had bought it outright with the bonus I gave him. No, it is not, I said calmly. Jamal bought it. It is an asset. Chloe looked at Jamal furious. She was cornered. If she said no, she admitted she didn't believe her father would pay me back. If she said yes, she risked losing her status symbol. Fine, she snapped. We will sign it, but we need the money tonight. I nodded. I opened the box. Inside were stacks of $100 bills. I had withdrawn them months ago for a contractor who never showed up. It wasn't 50,000, it was maybe 20, but stacked up like that, it looked like $1 million. I am not giving you this tonight, I said, closing the lid with a snap. Chloe's face fell. What? Why? Because I need to go to the bank tomorrow to get the rest. I lied. This is just 5,000. The rest is in a safety deposit box. But tomorrow might be too late, she whined. Then tell your father to stall, I said firmly. Come back tomorrow evening, alone. I don't want to upset Ruth with business talk. I looked at Ruth, who was wringing her hands, looking terrified for them. Ruth, honey, go make some tea, I said gently. When she was gone, I stepped closer to Chloe. I loomed over her, letting my sighs and my silence do the work. Tomorrow, I said, 6 p.m., and bring the title. We will, Chloe said, standing up. She wiped her dry eyes. Thank you, Otis. You are a good man. She didn't mean it. To her, a good man was a useful idiot. They left 10 minutes later, the Porsche roaring down the street too fast. I stood in the driveway watching them go. I felt the cool night air on my face. I didn't have $50,000 in a safety deposit box, but I did have $50,000 in a liquid account I used for property maintenance. I could get it, and I was going to give it to them, but not before I marked every single bill, not before I installed a GPS tracker in the bag I would give them, and not before I put a recording device in the lining. I walked back inside where Ruth was waiting. You are a savior, Otis, she said, hugging. I don't know what they would do without you. I hugged her back, my eyes open, staring at the wall. They are about to find out. Ruth, I thought. They are about to find out exactly what I am. I wasn't a savior. I was a trap. And they had just walked right into me. The clock on the wall ticked past 5:59, and the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I sat in my armchair in the dim light of the living room, staring at the old canvas duffel bag sitting on the coffee table. It was a beat-up thing, olive green with a broken zipper on the side pocket, the kind of bag you use to carry tools or gym clothes, not a fortune. Inside there were 50 stacks of $100 bills, $50,000. It was a lot of money. It was enough to fix the roof a dozen times over, enough to take Ruth to that island she always talked about, enough to put a down payment on a starter home for a sensible couple. But to Chloe and her family, it was just lunch money. It was a down payment on a lie. I had spent the morning at the bank, but not just withdrawing cash. I had sat in the manager's office, a man I had known since he was a teller, and I asked for a very specific favor. I wanted older bills, nothing consecutive, nothing that looked like it came fresh from the mint. And before I put a single one of them into that bag, I sat at my kitchen table with a UV marker and put a small dot on the corner of every single bill. It took me 3 hours. My hand cramped, but I didn't stop. If this money ever showed up in a court of law or a police evidence locker, I would be able to identify it. But the real trap wasn't the ink, it was the bag itself. I had spent a lifetime working with structures, understanding how things were put together and how to hide the seam. I had taken a razor blade to the bottom lining of the bag and slipped in a high-end digital recorder and a GPS tracker the size of a quarter. I sewed it back up with a thread that matched the original stitching perfect. They could dump the money out and shake the bag upside down and they would never find it. I heard the rumble of the Porsche before I saw it. It was an aggressive sound, an engine that wanted to be heard. They pulled into the driveway and I watched through the blinds. Jamal got out first. He looked worse than he had the night before. His shoulders were slumped and he was wringing his hand. Chloe stepped out looking like she was going to a board meeting. She was wearing a sharp blazer and heels, carrying a designer portfolio. She looked at my house like she was inspecting a tear-down property, assessing the value of the land and ignoring the life inside it. I let them ring the bell twice before I opened it. I needed to look tired. I needed to look beaten. I let my shoulders sag and put a tremor in my hand as I unlocked the door. "Otis," Chloe said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her voice was tight, urgent. "Do you have it? My father is frantic. The bank is calling every hour." I looked at Jamal. He couldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at his shoes, expensive Italian leather that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. "I have it," I said, my voice raspy. I kept my voice low. "Ruth is sleeping. I don't want her to know about this. She would worry. Her heart." Chloe nodded vigorously, her eyes darting. "Of course. We don't want to upset Ruth. Where is it?" I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the green bag. I held it tight against my chest for a moment, hugging it like it was a child. I needed them to see the hesitation. I needed them to think this was hard for me. "This is everything," I said, looking at Chloe. "This is my retirement fund. This is what I saved from 40 years of pouring concrete and breathing dust. If this goes, I have nothing. Ruth and I, we will be on the street." Chloe's expression softened into a mask of sympathy that was so perfect, it was terrifying. She reached out and touched my arm. "Otis, you have nothing to worry about. My father is a man of honor. As soon as the international transfers clear next week, you will have this back plus interest. We are family. We protect our own." I looked at her hand on my arm. It felt cold. I looked at Jamal again, waiting for him to step in, to say, "No, Dad, keep your money. We will figure it out." But he didn't. He just stood there, vibrating with anxiety, waiting for the transaction to be over. I handed the bag to Chloe. She took it, and the weight of it seemed to surprise her. She didn't open it to count it. She just clutched it the way a starving man clutches bread. "Thank you," she breathed. "You saved us." "And the collateral?" I asked. She motioned to Jamal. He stepped forward and handed me a folder. I opened it. The title to the Porsche was there, signed over, and a promissory note typed up neatly just like I asked. It looked official. It looked real. But I knew it was worth less than the paper it was printed on. They never intended to pay me back. They intended to declare bankruptcy or claim the car was stolen or simply wait for me to die. I took the folder and placed it on the mantel next to the picture of Jamal in his graduation gown. "We should go," Chloe said, turning toward the door. "We need to get this to the bank before the wire cut off." On a Sunday evening, I asked innocently. She didn't miss a beat. "Private banking, Otis. They operate 24/7 for clients like my father." "Right," I said. "Of course." They walked out the door. Jamal paused on the threshold. He looked back at me, and for a second, I saw the boy I raised. I saw the guilt eating him alive. "Thanks, Pop," he whispered. "I promised." Chloe grabbed his arm and yanked him. "Jamal, we have to go." The door closed. I heard the lock click. I didn't move. I didn't go to the window. I walked straight to the kitchen table where I had my laptop set up. I put on a pair of noise-canceling headphones and opened the application that connected to the bug in the bag. The signal was strong. I could hear the crunch of gravel as they walked to the car. I heard the beep of the alarm being disarmed. I heard the heavy thud of the car doors closing. The sound quality was crystal clear. It was like I was sitting in the back seat with them. The engine roared to life. I held my breath. This was it. This was the moment the mask would fall. For the first 30 seconds, there was just the sound of the engine and the tires on the pavement. Then Chloe started to laugh. It started as a giggle and grew into a full-throated cackle, a sound of pure, unadulterated triumph. "Oh my God," she shrieked. "I cannot believe that worked. I cannot believe he actually had that kind of cash stashed in that dump. Did you see his face, Jamal? He looked like he was handing over his kidney." I sat in my kitchen, my eyes closed, listening to the woman my son loved mock my sacrifice. "Otis, the builder," she mimicked, her voice dropping to a fake deep register. "This is all I have left. This is my dust money. What a pathetic old fool. He actually thinks he is a savior." Jamal's voice came through softer, shaky. "Chloe, we should get this to your dad. He needs to pay the bank right." There was a pause, then the sound of a zipper being ripped open. I could hear the rustle of the paper bands on the money. "You idiot," Chloe spat. "There is no bank. My dad doesn't owe anyone $50,000. He owes people millions, but $50,000 wouldn't even cover the interest. This isn't for the bank." "Then what is it for?" Jamal asked, his voice rising in panic. You said if we didn't get this, they would lose the house." Chloe laughed again. "That house is a rental, Jamal. We are losing it anyway. This money isn't for bills. Look at this." I heard the slap of a stack of bills hitting the dashboard. "This is for me," she said. "Do you know how long I have been eyeing that Birkin bag? The limited edition Himalayan. It is $40,000, and I am am going to buy it tomorrow morning, and with the rest, I think we should put a deposit down on that condo in the city, the one with the view." But Jamal stammered. "But the Porsche. I signed over the title. If we don't pay him back in 30 days, he takes my car." Chloe snorted. "Let him try. By the time 30 days are up, we will have him committed. Or he will have had an unfortunate accident on those rickety stairs. Who is going to enforce a contract signed by a senile man? Besides, the car is in your name, but the loan is in your name too. If he takes it, you just stop paying the loan and let the bank repo it from his driveway. It is genius." Jamal was silent for a moment. I could hear his breathing fast and shallow. "You promised," he said, his voice cracking. "You promised this was to pay off the debt so your parents wouldn't go to jail. You swore on your life, Chloe." "I swore on a lie," Chloe replied, her voice turning cold and hard as steel. "Grow up, Jamal. This is how the world works. The strong take from the weak. Your father is weak. He is a hoarder sitting on a pile of cash he is too afraid to spend. We are doing him a favor. We are circulating the economy." "But it is his retirement," Jamal argued. "He said, if he loses this, he has nothing. He has the house," Chloe said, "for now. And when we sell that, we will have real money. This 50 grand is just an appetizer. Now shut up and drive. I want to get to the mall before it closes. I want to smell that leather." Jamal didn't say anything else. I heard the engine rev as he accelerated. He was doing what he was told. He was driving the getaway car. I took the headphones off and laid them gently on the table. The silence of the kitchen rushed back in, but it felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was charred. I walked over to the sink and poured the rest of my water down the drain. My hands were steady. My heart was beating slow and strong like a war drum. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a hoarder sitting on a pile of cash I didn't understand. They had no idea. I picked up my phone and dialed Vance, my private investigator. "You get that, Vance?" I asked. Loud and clear, Otis. His voice crackled in my ear. "I am recording everything. The tracking shows they are heading toward Lenox Square." "Good," I said. "Let them buy the bag. Let them spend every single dime." "You want me to intervene?" Vance asked. "No," I said. "Not yet. I want the paper trail. I want the receipts. I want footage of her walking out of that store with a $40,000 bag paid for with my retirement money." "Understood. And the car title." I looked at the folder on the mantel. "I have it," I said. "It is valid. But she is right about one thing. The bank holds the lien." "But she forgot something, Vance." "What is that, Otis?" "I bought the note," I said. "I called the bank this morning before they came over. I bought the debt on that Porsche. I own the loan now." Vance laughed a low, dry sound. "You are a dangerous man, Otis King." "I am just a father teaching his son a lesson," I said. "Keep watching them, Vance. Let me know when they get home." I hung up the phone and walked into the bed. Ruth was sleeping soundly, her chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched her. She looked so peaceful. She had no idea that we were at war. I reached out and brushed a stray hair from her forehead. "Sleep well, Ruth," I whispered. "I'm taking care of." I went back to the living room and sat in the dark. I watched the GPS dot on my laptop screen moving across the map of Atlanta. It stopped at the high-end mall just like Chloe wanted. It stayed there for an hour. Then it moved to a steakhouse. I imagined them eating steaks paid for with my sweat. I imagined Chloe laughing, her hand resting on a bag that cost more than my first house. I imagined Jamal cutting his meat, trying to swallow his conscience. "Enjoy your meal," I said to the empty room. "It is going to be the most expensive dinner you ever had." I closed the laptop. The trap was sprung. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the jaws to snap shut. And when they did, I was going to make sure everyone saw the blood. The week after I handed over $50,000 of my hard-earned retirement money wrapped in a GPS-tracked duffel bag, the silence in my house was replaced by a whirlwind of calculated joy. Chloe did not waste any time. She knew that money was a finite resource, and to get the big prize, the house and the land she needed to escalate the timeline. She came over on a Tuesday evening wearing a loose-fitting dress and a glow that I knew was as fake as the pearls around her neck. She sat Ruth down on the sofa holding her hands, and with a tear in her eye, she dropped the bomb that she had promised her father in that wine cellar. "We are pregnant," she whispered, her voice trembling with a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Ruth let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. She pulled Chloe into a hug, rocking her back and forth. My wife, who had been feeling weaker lately, seemed to gain a sudden burst of energy from the news. She was crying tears of pure happiness, thanking God for a blessing that I knew was a curse. Jamal stood in the corner looking pale and nauseous. He knew, or at least he suspected. He forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. I stood by the fireplace, my arms crossed, feeling the cold steel of my watch against my wrist. I remembered the footage. I remembered Chloe's voice echoing in the security room. "I just have to tell them I am pregnant. Just a little lie about a grandbaby." "It is early," Chloe said, pulling away from Ruth and wiping her eyes. "But we wanted you to know first. We want this baby to grow up surrounded by family. That is why," she paused, looking at me, then back at Ruth. "That is why we were thinking about the house. We need a stable home for the baby. Our apartment is so small, and with the financial issues my parents are having, we just want to feel safe. If the deed was in our name, we could take out a construction loan to add a nursery. We could update the wiring. We could make it perfect for the next generation." There it was, the hook. She used the unborn child as leverage before it even existed. Ruth looked at me, her eyes pleading. She would give them the moon if she could. "We will talk about it," I said, my voice low and final. "Let's just celebrate the news for now." I needed proof. I knew she was lying, but I needed something concrete, something that would hold up when I finally dropped the hammer. The next morning, I drove to a nondescript office building in the industrial district. The sign on the door said Vance Security Consulting, but inside it smelled like old coffee and cigarette smoke, just like the barracks we shared in 71. Vance was a man who moved in the shadows, a man who could find a needle in a haystack if the needle had a social security number. I sat across from him, his desk piled high with files. He didn't smile. He just slid a manila envelope across the scarred wood surface. "You were right, Otis," he said, his voice gravelly. "But it is worse than you think." I opened the envelope. Inside were medical records obtained through channels I didn't ask about. I put on my reading glasses and scanned the pages. There were dates, procedures, and doctor's notes. One entry stood out highlighted in yellow. Bilateral salpingectomy, date of procedure 3 years ago. I looked up at Vance. My medical terminology was rusty, but I knew enough structural engineering to know what happens when you cut a line. "She is sterilized." I asked, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Completely," Vance confirmed. "She had it done voluntarily 3 years ago. She cannot get pregnant, Otis. It is physically impossible. There is no baby. There never will be a baby." I stared at the paper, my hand trembling with a rage so hot it felt cold. She was lying to my wife about a grandchild. She was using a phantom baby to trick a sick woman out of her home. It wasn't just greed anymore. It was cruelty. It was a level of psychological warfare that I hadn't seen since the war. "Does Jamal know?" I asked. Vance shrugged. "The records show she went alone. She listed herself as single at the time. But Otis, if he believes her, he is a fool. And if he knows, he is a monster." I took the file and put it back in the envelope. I had the smoking gun. I could go home right now, throw this on the table, and watch her lies crumble. But I couldn't. Not yet. Ruth was too fragile. If I destroyed her dream of a grandchild violently, it might destroy her too. I needed to dismantle Chloe carefully, piece by piece. I drove home, the envelope tucked under the seat of my truck. When I walked in, the house was quiet. Too quiet. "Ruth," I called out. I found her in the bedroom, lying on top of the covers. She was pale, her skin looking gray against the white pillowcase. She was breathing shallowly, her hand clutching her chest. "Ruth." I rushed over, my heart hammering. "What is it? Do you need the hospital?" She opened her eyes and smiled weakly. "I am just tired, Otis. So tired. My heart is racing a little." I checked her pulse. It was erratic, thumping hard and fast, then slowing down. "Did you take your medicine?" I asked. "Yes," she whispered. "And Chloe came by. She is such a sweet girl, Otis. She brought me some new supplements. She said they are holistic, good for energy and heart health. She said her mother uses them." My blood ran cold. "Supplements. Where are they?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "On the nightstand, the green bottle." I looked. It was a generic plastic bottle with a handwritten label that said Energy and Heart Blend. I picked it up. It felt light. I unscrewed the cap and smelled it. It smelled bitter chemical, almost like almonds and caffeine. "Did you take these?" I asked. "Just 2, she said. Like she said. I looked at my wife, my Ruth, who had trusted everyone her whole life. Chloe wasn't just waiting for her to die. She was speeding up the process. She was poisoning her. 6 months. Maybe less if we add a little stress, or maybe if we add a little stimulant to a weak heart. "I have to go to the pharmacy," I said, standing up. "I think they mixed up your regular meds. I will be right back." I didn't go to the pharmacy. I went to my workshop in the garage. I grabbed a clean, empty vial and poured half of the green capsules into it. Then I took a bottle of harmless multivitamins I kept in my locker, emptied them out, and crushed them into a powder, refilling the green capsules with the inert dust. It took me 20 minutes, my hands working with the precision of a surgeon. I went back inside and swapped the bottles. "Here," I said, "take this water." I watched her, knowing she was safe now from the pills, but terrified of what was happening. I pocketed the vial with the real poison. I needed to know exactly what was in them. I needed a toxicology report. I drove to the local university where an old friend ran the chemistry lab. I dropped the sample off with a rush order and a stack of cash. As I drove back home, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the road. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I had the medical records proving the pregnancy was a lie. I had the pills that were likely poison. I had the video of them plotting our destruction. But I still needed one more thing. I needed to trap them legally. I needed to make sure that when the steel jaws of my trap slammed shut, they would never be able to open them again. I pulled into the driveway and saw the Porsche. They were back. I walked into the house, my face a mask of weary defeat. Chloe was in the kitchen making tea for Ruth. She looked up at me, smiling that angelic smile. "Hi, Dad," she said. "I was just checking on Mom. She seems a little down today. I hope she is taking care of herself. We need her strong for the baby." I looked at her stomach, the flat stomach that she claimed held my lineage. I looked at the tea she was brewing, wondering what she had put in it. "She is fine," I said, my voice flat. "Just excitement." I walked over to the counter. "Chloe," I said, "I have been thinking." Her ears perked up. "About what?" "About the house." She stopped stirring the tea. She turned to me, her eyes hungry. think you are right, I said. This place, it is too much for us, and with the baby coming, maybe it is time to transfer the deed. Chloe let out a breath she had been holding. Oh, Otis, that is the wisest decision. We can take care of everything. We can build that nursery. I nodded. But I need to do it right. I want to use my lawyer, Vance. He is old school, but he is thorough. Of course, she said quickly. Whatever you want. Set up a dinner, I said. Invite your parents. Invite everyone. We will do it properly. A celebration. I will sign the papers then. Her eyes lit up. A celebration. Yes, my parents would love that. Maybe Friday. Friday, I agreed. She hugged me. It was like being hugged by a snake. Thank you, Dad. You won't regret this. I watched her walk away, her hips swaying. No, Chloe, I thought. I won't regret it. But you will. I went to the bedroom and checked on Ruth. She was sleeping peacefully now, the fake pills doing no harm. I sat in the chair by the bed and took out my phone. I dialed Vance. I have the sample, I whispered. And I set the date. Friday. Get the paperwork ready. What kind of paperwork? Otis Vance asked. The kind that buries people, I said. I hung up and watched my wife sleep. They had tried to kill her. They had tried to erase my family line with a lie. I looked at my hand. They were strong. They were calloused. They were ready to tear the world apart to keep her safe. Friday. It was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare the final act. 3 days to turn a celebration into a funeral for their greed. I sat in the cab of my truck in the parking lot of the university chemistry building holding a single sheet of paper that weighed more than any steel beam I had ever lifted. The air conditioning was blasting full force, but I felt a line of sweat trickling down my spine. It was not the heat. It was the cold, hard realization that the woman sleeping under my roof, the woman who called me Dad, was not just a thief, she was a killer. My friend Dr. Aris had handed me the report without looking me in the eye. He was a good man, a man of science, and he looked shaken. Otis, he had said, his voice low and serious, these are not herbal supplements. This is a homemade compound. High concentrations of pseudoephedrine, caffeine, anhydrous, and a digitalis extract. In a healthy person, this would cause palpitations, maybe a panic attack. But for someone with a heart condition like Ruth, this is not a supplement. It is a landmine. I stared at the chemical breakdown. I did not need to be a chemist to understand the intent. They were revving her heart engine until the pistons blew. They wanted a natural death, a tragedy in the night. Oh, poor Ruth, her heart just gave out. They wanted a funeral so they could get the house without waiting for probate. I crumpled the paper in my fist, listening to the crinkle of the fiber. My knuckles turned ash gray. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I saw red. Not the red of anger, but the deep, dark red of blood. My wife's blood. The sadness I had felt for Jamal, the disappointment, the grief over a family lost, it all evaporated. In its place, something else settled in. It was a cold, heavy sensation in my chest, like pouring concrete into a form. It was resolve. It was the feeling a soldier gets when the enemy crosses the line and the rules of engagement change. They had tried to kill Ruth. They had tried to take the only pure thing in my life and snuff it out for a quick payday. I started the truck. The engine growled a low, dangerous sound that matched the vibration in my chest. I drove home with absolute focus. I did not speed. I did not run red light. I drove with the precision of a man carrying a nuclear warhead. I was not going to make a mistake. I was not going to give them an inch. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as it always did. The roses were blooming by the port. The curtains were drawn against the afternoon sun. It looked like a home, but I knew it was a battlefield. I walked inside and went straight to the bedroom. Ruth was sitting up in bed reading a magazine. She looked up and smiled when I entered, but her smile was tired. The stress of the last few weeks, the constant pressure from Chloe and the fake pregnancy news was taking its toll even without the poison. Hey, honey, she said, did you get your errands done? I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. Her skin was soft and thin like paper. I could feel the pulse in her wrist, steady and rhythmic. I vowed right then and there that I would burn the world down before I let that rhythm stop. I did, I said. Ruth, I need you to listen to me carefully. She frowned, sensing the shift in my mood. What is it, Otis? You look so serious. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the bottle of fake pills I had made, the ones filled with harmless multivitamin dust. I placed them on the nightstand next to her water glass. These pills, I said, pointing to the bottle. Chloe brought them because she wants you to have energy. She wants you to feel better. Ruth nodded. She is so sweet, Otis. Always thinking of me. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Yes, she is. But Ruth, I spoke to the doctor. He said that sometimes when you start a new regiment, your body needs time to adjust. He said you might feel tired. You might feel weak. Ruth looked confused. But they are for energy. I know. But sometimes energy supplements can have a reverse effect at first. I need you to do something for me. I need you to take these just like she said. But I need you to tell Chloe and Jamal that you are feeling worse. Worse, she asked. Why would I do that? Because I lied, my mind racing to find a story that wouldn't break her heart. I want to test them. I want to see if they are patient. If they are ready to take care of a grandchild, they need to to show they can be patient with a sick grandmother. If you act strong, they might think you don't need help. I want to see them step up, Ruth. I want to see Jamal take care of you, not just when it is easy, but when it is hard. It was a weak lie, but Ruth trusted me implicitly. She looked at the bottle, then at me. You think they need testing? She asked softly. I think everyone needs testing, I said. Just for a few days. Tell them your chest feels heavy. Tell them you are short of breath. Tell them you need to lie down a lot. Can you do that for me? Ruth sighed and patted my hand. You are always worrying about them, Otis. You are a good father. Okay, I will play the invalid, but only for a few days. I don't want to miss the celebration on Friday. The dinner, the trap. No, I said. You won't miss it. You will be there front and center. I kissed her forehead and stood up. I watched her take 2 of the harmless capsules and wash them down with water. I knew she was safe now physically, but I had to make sure she was safe legally, financially, and permanently. I left the bedroom and walked out to the garage. My workshop was my sanctuary. It smelled of sawdust and engine oil. I locked the door behind me and turned on the single overhead bulb. I sat on my stool and pulled out my burner phone. There was only one person I could call for what needed to happen next. Vance was a private investigator, yes, but before that, he was a lawyer. And not just any lawyer. He was the kind of lawyer you called when you needed to bury a body, legally speaking. He was white, he was cynical, and he was the only man outside of my unit that I trusted with my life. We had done business for 20 years. He never looked down on me. He never underestimated me. He knew exactly what kind of steel I was made of. I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. King, he said. His voice was like grinding gears. I got the report from the lab. Then you know I said, I know Vance said, attempted murder in the 1st degree. We can go to the cops right now, Otis. We have the pills. We have the report. We can have her in cuffs by dinner. I looked at the tools hanging on my wall. Hammers, saws, wrenches, tools for building and tools for dismantling. No cops, I said. Not yet, Otis Vance warned. Van. This isn't a game. She is dangerous. I know she is dangerous. But if we arrest her now, what happens? She gets a lawyer. Her daddy pulls strings. She cries and says it was a mistake that she bought them at a health food store and didn't know. Maybe she walked. Maybe she gets a slap on the wrist. And Jamal, he will defend her. He will say, I framed her. I will lose my son forever and I will be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. So what is the play? Vance asked. I want to destroy them, Vance. I want to strip them bare. I want to take the house, the cars, the pride, the reputation. I want them to wake up in a gutter wondering what hit them. I want total structural failure. I could hear Vance lighting a cigarette on the other end of the line. He exhaled a long, slow breath. Scorched earth, he said. I like it. How do we do it? Friday, I said. The dinner. They think I am signing over the deed to the house. They think I am handing over the keys to the kingdom. And you want to hand them a grenade instead? Exactly. I need you to draft some papers, Vance. I need a deed of transfer, but not for the house. What are we transferring? Debt, I said. I want you to set up a shell company. Make it look legitimate. Make it look like a holding firm for high-value assets. I want you to buy the debt on the Sterling's rental property. I want you to buy the debt on Jamal's Porsche. I want you to buy every single liability they have. I can do that? Vance said. I can hear the smile in his voice. It will cost you. I have the money. I have been saving for a rainy day, and it is pouring outside. Okay, so we own their debt. Then what? Then I need a contract. A document that looks like a property transfer, but is actually a confession of judgment. I want language in there that says, by signing this, they acknowledge full liability for all outstanding debts held by the shell company, and they waive their right to trial. I want a clause that says any assets they currently possess become collateral immediately upon signature. That is aggressive, Otis. A judge might frown on it. Not if they sign it willingly, I said. Not if they think they are signing for a free house. They are greedy, Vance. Greed makes people blind. They won't read the fine print. They will just see the title deed on the front page. And what about the house? Vance asked. The one they want. I want you to put the house in an irrevocable trust, I said, in Ruth's name with me as the trustee. And I want a clause that says, if anything unnatural happens to either of us, the property is liquidated and the proceeds go to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Vance laughed. You are a cold son of a gun, Otis. They tried to stop my wife's heart, Vance. I am just returning the favor. I sat there in the dim light of the garage listening to Vance typing on his keyboard. The sound was rhythmic, soothing. It was the sound of a trap being set. I also need one more thing, I said. What is that? I need you to come to dinner, Vance asked. I am not exactly dinner party material. I need a witness, I said, and I need someone to serve the papers when the time comes. I want you there, Vance. I want you to see the look on their faces when the floor drops out. What time? 7 o'clock. Wear a suit and bring the file on Chloe, the medical record, the sterilization proof. Bring it all. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of the garage. I looked at my hand. They were steady. I thought about the pills, the little green capsules of death. I thought about Chloe smiling and calling me dad while she handed my wife poison. I stood up and walked over to the workbench. I picked up a heavy iron wrench, weighing it in my hand. It was a tool for tightening bolts, but it could also be a weapon. Friday was coming. I put the wrench down. I didn't need it. I had something better. I had the truth, and I was going to wield it like a sledgehammer. I turned off the light and walked back into the house. I checked on Ruth one more time. She was watching a game show on TV, laughing at a bad answer. She looked alive. I went into the kitchen and started making dinner. I chopped vegetables with precise rhythmic stroke. Chop, chop, chop. Just like the seconds ticking down on Chloe's life. She wanted a heart attack. She wanted a natural disaster. I was going to give her, but it wasn't going to be Ruth's heart that stopped. It was going to be hers when she realized she had lost everything. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor of the Sovereign building was smooth and silent, fast enough to make your ears pop, but quiet enough to hear the distinct sound of my wife's labored breathing. Ruth was holding my arm, her grip tight. She was wearing her Sunday best, a navy blue dress with a white collar that she had ironed twice that afternoon. She looked beautiful to me, dignified and graceful, but I could feel the tension radiating off her. She was intimidated. She thought we were ascending into Olympus to dine with God. I knew better. We were walking into a lion's den. The apartment was exactly what I expected. It was a penthouse suite, rented fully furnished. I knew this because Vance had pulled the lease agreement 2 hours ago. The Sterlings had paid the first month's rent and the security deposit with a cashier's check that suspiciously matched the amount I had given Chloe. They were living in a castle built on my retirement fund, and tonight they had invited us over to show off the view. Richard Sterling opened the door before I could knock. He was wearing a velvet smoking jacket and holding a tumbler of amber liquid. He looked like a man without a care in the world, a man who certainly didn't owe millions to creditors across 3 continents. "Otis, Ruth, come in, come in," he boomed, his voice filling the marble foyer. "Welcome to our humble abode." I stepped inside my work boots, sinking into a rug that probably cost more than my truck. The place smelled of leather and expensive cologne, a scent designed to mask the smell of desperation. "Thank you for having us, Richard," I said, keeping my voice low and humble. "It is a mighty fine place you have here." Ruth looked around, her eyes wide. "Oh, Veronica, it is breathtaking. The view of the city." Veronica Sterling glided into the room holding a glass of champagne. She kissed the air next to Ruth's cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. "It will do for now, Ruth," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "We are just here while we look for something more permanent. The market in Atlanta is so quaint compared to London or Dubai, but we managed." We moved into the dining room where a long table was set with enough silverware to perform a surgery. Chloe and Jamal were already seated. Jamal looked pale, his eyes darting toward me nervously. He knew where the money for this dinner had come from. He knew the secrets buried in the foundation of this family. Chloe, on the other hand, was radiant. She sat at the foot of the table like a queen in waiting, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, the stomach that held nothing but lies. "Sit, Otis, sit," Richard commanded, pointing to a chair. "Tonight is about family. It is about gratitude. You really came through for us with that loan. A temporary hiccup, of course, but your assistance allowed us to keep things moving smoothly." I sat down. I looked at the array of forks and spoons in front of me. I knew exactly what they were for. I had dined with mayors and city planners. I knew which fork was for the salad and which was for the fish. But tonight, I wasn't Otis King, the successful engineer. I was Otis the handyman. I was the simpleton they needed me to be. I picked up the heavy soup spoon and held it like a shovel, my grip clumsy. I saw Richard's eyes flick to my hand. A small smirk played on his lips. He exchanged a look with Veronica, a look that said, "Look at the animal trying to eat like a person." "So Otis," Richard said, unfolding his napkin with a flourish. "Tell me, what have you been doing with yourself since retirement? Just puttering around that little house of yours?" I kept my eyes on my plate. "Oh, you know, Richard, just keeping busy, fixing things, keeping the grass cut." "Ruth likes the garden," quaint Richard said. He took a sip of his drink. "You know, Otis, a man's golden years should be about expansion, not maintenance. You have worked hard. You worked with your hands right. Manual labor." "That is right," I said. "Concrete, steel, heavy lifting, honorable work," Richard said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. "But let's be honest, Otis, it doesn't pay the big dividend. It doesn't build empires. Now take what I do. I move capital. I create value out of thin air." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "In fact, that is why I wanted to talk to you tonight. I feel I owe you, Otis. You helped us with that small cash flow issue, and I want to return the favor. I want to bring you in on something." I chewed my food slowly, forcing myself to swallow. Here it comes, I thought. The pitch. "Oh, I don't know anything about business, Richard," I said, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand instead of the napkin. "I just save my pennies." "Pennies are for children, Otis," Richard said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I am talking about wealth, generational wealth. I am currently putting together a syndicate for a development project in Dubai. Artificial islands, Otis. Luxury villas floating on the water. The returns are projected at 400% in the first year." Ruth gasped. 400%? Is that real?" "It is very real," Veronica chimed in. "We have invested everything in it. That is why our cash was tied up. It is the opportunity of a lifetime. Richard pointed a manicured finger at me. I can get you in, Otis. Usually the buy-in is $1 million minimum, but for family, I can make an exception. I shook my head slowly. I don't have $1 million, Richard. You saw my saving. That bag, that was it. Richard smiled, a shark-smelling blood in the water. You don't need cash, Otis. You have asset. You have equity. That house of the land it sits on. It is dead money. It is just sitting there doing nothing. If you leveraged it, if you took out a mortgage or even better signed the deed over to the holding company as collateral, you could buy a share. Jamal dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. Dad, he said, his voice tight. Don't! Chloe shot him a look that could have frozen water. Jamal, be quiet. Your father is being offered a gift. Richard ignored my son. He kept his eyes locked on me. Think about it, Otis. You mortgage the house. We invest the capital. In 6 months, you pay off the mortgage, and you have 3 times the value of your home in cash. You could move Ruth out of that drafty old place, buy her something nice, something she deserves. I looked at Ruth. She looked terrified and hopeful all at once. She trusted me, but the numbers Richard was throwing around were intoxicating. I don't know, I said, scratching my head. Mortgages scare me. I worked 30 years to pay that house off. I don't like owing people. Fear keeps you poor, Otis, Richard said, leaning back in his chair. You have to be bold. You have to think big. Look at me. Do I look worried? You look like a thief in a rented suit, I thought. I looked down at my plate, pushing a piece of asparagus around. I needed to pivot. I needed to give him something juicier than the house, something that would make him forget about the mortgage for a few days while Vance set the trap. Well, I said slowly, I do have something else. Richard raised an eyebrow. Oh, I hesitated, playing the part of the reluctant old man revealing a secret stash. It is not money, I said. It is land. Richard sat up straighter. Land. Where? Down near the airport, I said. Old industrial district. My daddy left it to me. It is just a few acres. Ugly place. Nothing but weeds and old concrete slabs. I've been paying taxes on it for 40 years and it hasn't made me a dime. I tried to sell it once, but nobody wanted it. It is just wasteland. I saw the flicker in Richard's eyes. He knew the market. He knew that the airport district was undergoing a massive gentrification. Warehouses down there were selling for millions to logistics companies like Amazon and FedEx. If I had land down there, it was a gold mine, and I was calling it wasteland. Richard licked his lips. He tried to keep his voice casual, but I could hear the greed trembling underneath. Is that so? He said. Just weeds and concrete. Yeah, I sighed. I probably should just let the city take it for back taxes one day. It is a burden. I don't know what to do with it. Richard exchanged a look with Chloe. I saw the signal pass between them. The old fool doesn't know what he had. Well, Otis, Richard said, pouring me more wine, his hand shaking slightly. Maybe I could help you with that. I have friends in zoning. I have connections. I could take a look at it for you. Maybe we could work something out where I take that burden off your hands. In exchange for shares in the Dubai project, of course. I looked up at him, my eyes wide and innocent. You would do that, Richard. You would take that dirt lot for shares in a luxury island. I am doing it for you, Otis, he said, placing a hand over his heart. Because you are family, and because I hate to see you burdened in your old age. I smiled, a slow, grateful smile. That sounds mighty generous, Richard, I said. I have the deed in my safe. Maybe I could bring it over on Friday. To the dinner, Richard beamed. Friday is perfect. Bring the deed. We will have the papers drawn up. We will make you a rich man, Otis. He raised his glass. To family, and to new beginning. I raised my glass. To beginnings, I said. I drank the wine. It tasted good. It tasted like victory. Richard didn't know that the land I was talking about wasn't just a few acres of wheat. It was a 12-acre logistics hub that I had already leased to a national distribution chain for the next 20 years. The deed he wanted to get his hands on was wrapped up in so many corporate layers and trusts that he would need a team of forensic accountants just to find the name on the title. But he didn't check. He didn't ask for the parcel number. He was so blinded by the idea that I was an ignorant old laborer that he assumed I didn't know the value of dirt. He thought he was stealing candy from a baby. He didn't know the baby was holding a stick of dynamite. The rest of the dinner was a blur of self-congratulatory speeches from Richard and simpering agreement from Chloe. Jamal ate in silence, looking like a man marching to the gallows. Ruth relaxed a little, thinking that her husband had just made a smart business deal with a powerful man. When we finally left, Richard walked us to the elevator. He slapped me on the back again, harder this time. You made the right choice, Otis, he said. You are playing in the big leagues now. Don't worry about the details. I will handle everything. I know you will, Richard, I said, stepping into the elevator. I know you will. The doors closed, cutting off his smug face. I let out a breath I had been holding for 2 hours. Ruth squeezed my hand. He is very smart, isn't he, Otis? He is going to help us. I looked at my wife. I looked at her trusting eyes. Yes, Ruth, I said. He is going to help us. He doesn't know it yet, but he is going to give us everything he has. We drove home in the old truck, the city lights fading behind us. I felt the weight of the coming week. Friday was the deadline. Friday was the day the hammer fell. I had him. I had him on the hook. He wanted the land so bad he could taste it. He would sign anything I put in front of him if he thought it gave him the title to that property. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Vance. He took the bait. Prepare the transfer documents. And Vance, make sure the liability clause is in bold. I want him to see it and ignore it. Vance replied a minute later, drafting it now. You are a cruel man, Otis. I put the phone away. I wasn't cruel. I was just thorough. Structural integrity depends on removing the weak points. And Richard Sterling was the weakest point I had ever seen. He thought I was giving him a gold mine. I was giving him an anchor. And on Friday, I was going to watch him tie it around his own neck and jump. The next morning, I woke up with the clarity of a man who has already decided to burn the bridge while he is still standing on it. The dinner with the Sterlings had been the reconnaissance mission, but today was the start of the demolition. I needed to accelerate their panic. I needed to make them believe that the well was running dry, so they would act reckless and fast. Greed is a powerful motivator, but fear is the only thing that makes a predator sloppy, and I needed them sloppy. I went out to the garage and started dragging things onto the drive. Not junk, good things that had value. I pulled out the industrial lawnmower I had bought 3 years ago. I dragged out the set of patio furniture. Ruth loved the wrought irons that weighed a ton. I brought out my second best tool chest. I lined them up on the concrete like soldiers waiting for inspection. Then I took a stack of neon orange stickers and a black marker and I started writing price. $50 for the mower, $20 for the table, $10 for the tools. I was practically giving it away. My neighbor Mrs. Gable was walking her poodle. She was a woman who had a direct line to the neighborhood gossip network faster than any fiber optic cable. She stopped at the end of the driveway, her eyes popping out of her head. Otis, she called out. What in heaven's name are you doing? Are you moving? I walked over to her, wiping fake sweat from my forehead. I let my shoulders slump. I made my hands shake just enough to be noticeable. I wish I was moving, Mrs. Gable, I said, my voice trembling. I am liquidating. I have to raise cash. Fast. Why? She asked, leaning in over the fence. Is Ruth okay? Ruth is fine. I lied. It is me. I made a mistake, Mrs. Gable. A terrible mistake. A nice young man called me on the phone last week. He told me about this digital currency, crypto something. He said if I transferred my pension fund, he could double it in 24 hours. Mrs. Gable gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Oh no, Otis, you didn't. I looked at the ground, kicking a pebble with my boot. I sent it all. The saving, the emergency fund, even the line of credit on the house. And this morning, the website is gone. The number is disconnected. It is all gone, Miss Gable. Every dime. I looked up at her and let a single tear leak out of my eye. I am ruined. I have to sell everything just to pay the light bill. By noon, half the neighborhood knew that Otis King, the steady, reliable engineer, had lost his mind and his money. By 1 o'clock, the first cars started pulling up to buy my tools for pennies on the dollar. And by 2 o'clock, the Porsche screeched into my driveway. It came in so hot I thought Jamal was going to take out the mailbox. He slammed the car into park and jumped out, leaving the door open. Chloe was right behind him, stumbling a little in her heels, her face a mask of pure terror. Dad, Jamal shouted, running up the driveway. Dad, what are you doing? Why is the lawnmower sold? Why are people loading your tools into a truck? I was sitting on a folding chair by the garage door, holding a cigar box full of crumpled $5 bills. I looked up at him, blinking slowly like I was trying to focus. Jamal, I said. I needed cash, son. The electric company, they don't take checks anymore. I had to sell the drill press. Chloe pushed past Jamal. She looked frantic. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the house like she was afraid it was going to vanish into thin air. Otis, she demanded, her voice shrill. We heard rumors at the club. People are saying you lost your money. People are saying you wired your accounts to a scammer in Nigeria. Tell me it isn't true. Tell me you didn't touch the capital. I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eye. It wasn't concern for me. It was the fear of a parasite realizing the host was dying. I wanted to help, I mumbled, clutching the cigar box. The man on the phone, he sounded so smart. He said I could buy Ruth a castle. He said the returns were guaranteed. Chloe let out a scream of frustration and kicked the tire of my truck. You idiot, she shrieked. You stupid, senile old man. How much? How much did you send? Everything, I whispered. The retirement, the saving. I even took a cash advance on the credit card. And the land, she asked, grabbing my shirt collar. The land near the airport. Did you sell that too? I shook my head. No, not yet. But I called a guy. He said he could give me $10,000 cash for the deed today. I was going to meet him at 4. $10,000, Chloe gasped. That land is worth millions, you fool. She spun around to face Jamal. Fix this, she hissed. Fix this right now, Jamal. If he sells that land for $10,000, I am leaving you. I swear to God I am leaving you and I am taking everything. Jamal looked at her, then at me. He was sweating profusely, his face pale. He looked like a man whose world was collapsing. Dad, he said, stepping between us. us? You cannot sell that land. You cannot sell anything else. You are not thinking clearly. I have to pay the bills, Jamal. I whined, playing the part. I am broke. No, Jamal said, holding up his hand. Listen to me. You are not well. This proves it. You are falling for scam. You are selling our inheritance for scrap metal. Our inheritance. He said it out loud. He didn't even realize he had said it. We need to protect the asset. Chloe interrupted, her eyes wild. We need to secure the property before the creditors come. If he took cash advances, if he owes money, they will put a lien on the house. They will take everything. She grabbed Jamal's arm. Get him to sign, she whispered loudly. Get him to sign the transfer now, before he sells it for magic bean. Jamal turned on. His face was twisted with panic and anger. Dad, we are going to go inside. You are going to sign a document that gives me control over the house and the land. Temporary control, just to keep it safe from the scammers. I shook my head, clutching the cigar box tighter. No, it is my house. I worked for it. I can sell it if I want to. You can't, Jamal shouted. You are incompetent. Look at you. You are selling your life on the driveway. I stood up. I straightened my back just a little, letting some of the old Otis show through. I raised you better than this, Jamal, I said quietly. I raised you to respect your father, not to shout at him in his own yard. I don't care how you raised me, Jamal yelled, losing all control. You are ruining us. You are throwing away my future. You are a senile old man who doesn't know what he is doing. He stepped closer, towering over me. Just sign the damn papers, Dad. Sign them so I can fix your mess. Sign them before you end up on the street. I looked him in the eye. I looked deep into the eyes of the son I had held as a baby, the son I had taught to drive, the son I had bailed out of jail when he was 19. I looked for a trace of love or concern. I found nothing, just fear and greed and the reflection of his wife's ambition. I let the silence stretch. I let the neighbors watch. I let the wind rustle the leaves. You are worried about the money, Jamal. I asked, my voice low and dangerous. I am worried about you, he lied, but his voice cracked. No, you are not, I said. I took a step forward, invading his personal space. I dropped the senile act for just a second, my eyes locked onto his like a laser. Are you worried about me, son? I asked, my voice dropping an octave to the deep rumble that used to make construction crews silence their jackhammers. Or are you worried about that car in the driveway? Jamal blinked, confused by the shift in my tone. What? I pointed at the Porsche, the black shiny status symbol sitting on my cracked pavement. Are you worried about my future, I asked? Or are you worried about the payments on your wife's Porsche? Because if I go broke, Jamal, who pays the note? Jamal froze. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked at Chloe, then back at me. He saw something in my eyes he hadn't seen in a long time. He saw the iron. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, backing up a step. I think you do, I said, stepping back and letting my shoulders slump again, returning to the role of the confused old man. I think you were just stressed, like me. Chloe stepped in, sensing that Jamal was losing his nerve. Enough of this, she snapped. We are not going to stand here and argue with a crazy person. Jamal, get the papers from the car. The draft we made for Friday. We are doing this now. No, Jamal said, his voice shaking. Not now, Chloe. Look at him. He is weird today. He is ruining us, Chloe screamed. She pushed Jamal toward the car. Get the papers. I raised a hand. I am tired, I said, my voice trembling again. I am so tired. I don't want to sign anything today. My hand hurts. Chloe looked like she was going to attack me. Her hands clawed into fists. You will sign, she hissed. I will sign on Friday, I said, at the dinner, like we planned. If you bring me cash, $10,000 for the bill. Chloe stopped. She looked at Richard. She looked at the house. She did the math. $10,000 was nothing compared to the millions she thought the land was worth. Fine, she spat. Friday. But do not sell another thing, Otis. If I see one more stick of furniture missing, I will have you declared incompetent so fast your head will spin. She grabbed Jamal's arm and dragged him toward the car. Get in, she ordered him. We need to call my dad. We need to get cash. Jamal got into the driver's seat. He looked at me through the window one last time. He looked terrified. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost, and he had. He had seen the ghost of the father he used to respect, and he had seen the monster he had married. They peeled out of the driveway, leaving tire marks on the asphalt. I watched them go. I picked up the cigar box and walked back toward the garage. Mrs. Gable was still watching from the sidewalk, her mouth open. Is everything okay, Otis? She called out. I turned and winked at her. Everything is just fine, Mrs. Gable, I said. I am just cleaning house. I walked into the garage and closed the door. I leaned against the cool metal and let out a long breath. Jamal had made his choice. When I asked him about the car, he didn't deny it. He didn't ask how I knew. He just froze. He knew I was paying for his life, and he didn't care as long as the checks cleared. He called me senile. He called me a fool. I looked at the tools remaining on the shelves. I wasn't the fool. I took out my phone and called Vance. It worked, I said. They are panicked. They are going to bring the papers on Friday. Good, Vance said. The trap is ready. The shell company is active. We own their debt, Otis. We own all of it. I bought the Porsche note an hour ago, and the papers I asked. The transfer deed is drafted. It looks standard. But Clause 14 is a beauty. It assigns all liability to the transferee. By the time they realize what they signed, they will drown it. Good, I said. I hung up. I walked into the house. Ruth was in the kitchen, humming to herself, making tea. She didn't know about the yard sale. She didn't know about the screaming match in the driveway. driveway. She was in her own world, protected by my silence. I sat down at the table and watched her. I am sorry, Jamal, I thought. I am sorry I couldn't save you from yourself, but on Friday I was going to save myself, and I was going to save Ruth. And if I had to burn my son's world to ash to do it, then let it burn. The house was silent at 2 in the morning, a silence so deep you could hear the settling of the foundation beams. I lay 30. I was sitting in my leather armchair in the corner of the living room, the same chair I had sat in for thousands of nights watching my family grow. But tonight the darkness felt different. It was heavy, suffocating, like the air before a tornado touches down. I wasn't sleeping. I hadn't slept properly since I saw that video in the restaurant wine cellar. I was waiting. I heard the sound of a key sliding into the front door lock. It was a soft, metallic scrape followed by the click of the tumbler turning. It wasn't a burglar picking the lock. It was someone who had a key. It was someone who belonged here. The door creaked open slowly, and a beam of moonlight cut across the foyer floor. A shadow slipped inside, moving with the hesitant, jerky movements of a nervous animal. I didn't move. I kept my breathing shallow and rhythmic, merging with the shadows. I watched as the figure tiptoed past the hallway leading to the bedroom where Ruth was sleeping, safe and oblivious, thanks to the fake pills I had swapped. The figure moved toward the bookshelf in the corner. I heard the soft slide of wood against wood as the false panel was moved aside, revealing the face of the old iron safe. Then came the click of a flashlight. The beam was narrow, focused, shaking violently. It illuminated the dial of the safe and the hands working it. I knew those hands. I had held them when they were small enough to wrap around my pinky finger. I had bandaged them when he scraped them falling off his bike. I had shaken them the day he graduated college, bursting with pride. Now those hands were trying to rob me. He fumbled with the combination. He knew it, or thought he did. I had changed it 2 days ago, right after I bought the debt on his car. He spun the dial left, right, left. He tried the handle. Locked. He tried again, faster this time, his breathing coming in short, panicked gasps. "It is not going to open, Jamal," I said. My voice was low, calm, and it cut through the darkness like a whip. Jamal screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure terror, and spun around. He tripped over his own feet and crashed into the coffee table, sending a stack of magazines sliding onto the floor. The flashlight flew from his hand and rolled across the carpet, the beam spinning crazily before coming to rest on my work boots. He scrambled backward on his hands and feet until his back hit the wall. He was hyperventilating, clutching his chest, staring into the corner where I sat. "Dad," he gasped. "Dad, I didn't know you were up. I didn't turn on the lamp. I like the dark. It stripped away the pretenses. In the dark, you couldn't hide behind a fake smile or a designer suit. I have been waiting for you, son," I said. Jamal pulled himself up to a sitting position, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked like a child caught stealing from the cookie jar, but this wasn't cookies. This was my life. This was his mother's safety. I just needed, he stammered, his voice cracking. "I left some papers here, for the business. I thought they were in the safe." "Stop," I said. "Just stop." I leaned forward into the beam of the flashlight just enough for him to see my eyes. They were cold. They were the eyes of a man looking at a stranger. "You are not here for papers, Jamal. You are here because your wife told you to find the deed to the land. Or maybe the cash you think I have hidden. Or maybe you are looking for the life insurance policy so you can check the payout." Jamal flinched as if I had hit him. "Dad, no. It is not like that." "Then tell me what it is, like I said. Tell me why my son is breaking into my house in the middle of the night like a common thief. Tell me why you let your wife talk about your mother dying like it is a business transaction." He froze. His eyes went wide. You heard that?" "I know everything, Jamal. I know about the fake pregnancy. I know about the poison pills. I know about the debts. I know you are drowning." Jamal broke. It wasn't a slow crumble. It was a collapse. He put his head in his hands and started to sob. It was a pathetic, ugly sound. He cried like a man who has been carrying a burden for so long that his spine has finally snapped. "I can't help it, Dad," he wept, rocking back and forth. "I don't have a choice. You don't understand. They own me." "Who owns you?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "The Sterlings," he choked out. "Richard, Chloe, they know, Dad. They know about the money at the logistics firm." I felt a chill go down my spine. The logistics firm was his last employer before he started working for himself, or so he claimed. He had been a manager there. "What money, Jamal?" I borrowed some funds," he whispered. "Just a little at first, to keep up appearances. Chloe, she has expensive tastes, Dad. She wanted the trips, the clothes. I didn't want to lose her. I thought I could pay it back before the audit, but I couldn't. It was $50,000. I closed my eyes. $50,000. The exact amount he had asked me for. Richard found out. Jamal continued sniffling. "He has friends on the board. He got hold of the audit report before they went to the police. He said he would make it go away. He paid it off for me, Dad. He saved me from prison." "He didn't save you," I said, my voice hard. "He bought you." Jamal nodded, miserable. "He holds it over my head every day. He has the file. He says if I don't do what he wants, if I don't get him access access to your assets. He will turn the file over to the DA. I will go to jail, Dad. I will lose everything. My license, my reputation, my life. And Chloe, I asked, does she know? She is the one who told him, Jamal whispered. She found the bank transfers on my laptop. She gave them to her father. She said it was insurance. She said she loves me, but she needs to be sure I am committed to the family, to their family. I looked at the weeping man on my floor. My son, my blood. He had embezzled money to impress a woman who then used that crime to blackmail him into robbing his own parents. It was a cycle of weakness and stupidity that made my head spin. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. You stole money. You got caught. And instead of coming to me, instead of facing the consequences like a man, you let these people put a collar around your neck. You let them plan your mother's death just to keep your own skin safe. It is not like that, Jamal pleaded, looking up at me with tear-stained cheeks. I love Mom. I tried to stop them with the pills. I told Chloe it was too dangerous. But you didn't throw them away, I countered. You let her bring them into this house. You watched your mother swallow them. I knew they wouldn't kill her right away, Jamal argued weakly. Just make her sick. Enough to get the power of attorney. Dad, I am scared. They are dangerous people. Richard knows guys who break legs. I stood up. I towered over him in the dark. You are scared of Richard Sterling, I asked. A man who wears velvet jackets and steals from old women. I leaned down close to his face. You should be scared of me. Jamal recoiled, pressing himself into the drywall. You forgot who raised you, I said. You forgot where I came from. I walked steel beams 60 stories in the air with no harness. I fought in a jungle where the trees tried to kill you. And you think Richard Sterling scares me? I turned away from him, disgusted. Get up, I ordered. He scrambled to his feet, wiping his nose on his sleeve. Dad, please, help me. If you just sign the papers, if you give them the land, they will let me go. They will destroy the file. We can start over. Start over. I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. There is no starting over, Jamal. You crossed the line. You chose a thief over your father. You chose a murderer over your mother. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. I opened it wide, letting the cool night air rush in. Leave, I said. Jamal looked at the open door, then back at me. Dad, where am I supposed to go? Chloe kicked me out of the bedroom because I didn't come back with the deed. If I go back empty-handed, that is not my problem, I said. He stood there paralyzed by his own helplessness. You are my father, he whispered. You are supposed to protect me. I did protect you, I said, for 32 years. I protected you from hunger. I protected you from the cold. I protected you from the truth of how hard the world is. And look what it made you. Weak. I pointed out the door. A man doesn't cry when he gets caught doing wrong, Jamal. A man takes responsibility. A man pays his debts. You embezzled that money. You made that bed. Now you are going to lie in it. But jail, he whimpered. Maybe jail will teach you the character I failed to instill in you, said. He stared at me, shocked by the coldness in my voice. He had never seen this side of me. He had only seen the provider, the fixer, the safety net. He didn't realize that nets have holes and eventually you fall through. He walked to the door, slowly dragging his feet. He paused on the porch. I am sorry, Pop, he said. I really am. I looked at his back. I wanted to grab him. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to tell him I had a plan, that I was going to destroy the Sterlings and he could be free if he just stood by me. But I couldn't, because he wouldn't stand by me. He would run back to Chloe and tell her everything just to get a pat on the head. He was compromised. He was infected. Don't come back here, Jamal, I said. Not until you are ready to be a man. And tell your wife, tell her I will see her on Friday. I slammed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I slid the chain into place. I leaned my forehead against the wood and listened to his footsteps fading down the driveway. I heard the car start and drive away. I stood there in the dark for a long time. I felt a wetness on my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. I had lost my son. He wasn't dead, but he was gone. The boy I knew had been eaten alive by his own weakness. I walked back to the living room. I picked up the flashlight he had dropped. I turned it off. I sat back down in my chair. I was alone now, truly alone in this fight. Ruth was a civilian. Jamal was a traitor. It was just me and the wolf pack at the door. I closed my eyes and visualized the plan, the debt transfer, the shell company, the fake deed. It was all in motion. Jamal's betrayal hurt. It hurt like a physical wound, a deep laceration in my gut. But pain is a fuel. Pain keeps you awake. You want a war, Chloe, I whispered into the silence. You turned my son into a thief. You tried to kill my wife. I opened my eyes and stared at the safe, the one Jamal couldn't open. I am going to take everything from you, I promise. And when you are in the gutter looking up, you are going to see me standing there, and I won't offer you a hand. I checked my watch. It was 3 a.m., 2 days until Friday. I stood up and went to check on Ruth. She was still sleeping, the rise and fall of her chest, the only thing that mattered. And I would build a fortress around her. And if Jamal tried to climb the walls again, I would throw him off myself. The father in me was grieving, but the soldier was just loading weapons. The phone rang at 10:17 in the morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table nursing a cup of black coffee and watching Ruth pretend to read a garden mag. She was still keeping up the charade I had asked of her, acting weak and tired, though the color was returning to her cheeks now that the poison was out of her system. The ring cut through the quiet house like a fire alarm. I knew who it was before I picked it up. I had been been waiting for this call ever since I bought the debt on Jamal's car. Hello? I said, my voice calm. Mr. King, this is Bill Henderson from First National. Bill's voice was tight, strained. He was a good man, a man who had handled my accounts for 15 years. He knew me. He knew I didn't make mistakes. I have a young woman here, Bill said, lowering his voice. She claims to be your daughter-in-law, Chloe King. I took a sip of coffee. Is that so, Bill? And what does Mrs. King want? She is presenting a document, Mr. King. It is a general power of attorney. It looks, well, the notary seal is there. It states that due to your declining mental faculties, you have granted her full access to your liquid asset. She is attempting to close out your primary savings account. She wants a cashier's check for $200,000. I looked at Ruth. She was watching me, her eyes wide with fear. She sensed the tension in my posture, the way my hand gripped the phone. I let a small, cold smile touch my lip. 200,000. She was greedy. She wasn't just taking a slice, she was trying to take the whole loaf before Friday. She was panicked. My yard sale stunt had worked. She thought the money was disappearing, so she was trying to grab what was left. And what did you tell her, Bill? I asked. I told her I needed to verify the signature, Bill said. She is becoming agitated, Mr. King. She is raising her voice. She says you are at home confused and likely to burn the house down if she doesn't secure the funds for your care. I leaned back in my chair. Tell me, Bill, did you check the account status flag? There was a pause. I heard the clicking of a keyboard, then a sharp intake of breath. I see it, Bill said, his voice changing from worried to professional. Dual consent. Added last week. That is right, I said. That account is locked, Bill. It requires 2 signatures for any withdrawal over $500. Mine and my attorney, Mr. Vance. Does she have Mr. Vance with her? No, sir, Bill said, sounding relieved. She is alone. Then I guess you have to give her the bad news, I said. Tell her the system won't allow it. Tell her she needs the cosigner. And Bill, turn up the volume on your desk microphone. I want to hear this. I heard Bill clear his throat. I heard the muffled sounds of the bank lobby. Then I heard Bill's voice, distant but clear. Mrs. King, I am afraid I cannot process this transaction. What do you mean you can't? Chloe's voice shrieked through the phone line. It was sharp and ugly, stripping away all the polish she usually wore. I have the power of attorney. It is signed. Look at the signature. I see the document, ma'am, Bill replied, calm as a stone. But Mr. King placed a security protocol on this account last week. It is a dual consent trust. No funds can be moved without the physical presence and signature of his legal counsel, Mr. Vance. The system is hard locked. I couldn't override it if I wanted to. There was a silent, a heavy pause where I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head. Then the explosion. This is bullshit, she screamed. He is senile. He doesn't even know what day it is. How could he lock the account? He is tricking you. Give me the money. It is my money. I am his caretaker. Ma'am, please lower your voice, Bill said. I will not lower my voice, she yelled. You are stealing from me. That old bastard is stealing from me. I will sue you. I will sue this whole bank. I heard the scuffle of feet. Security, I heard Bill say. Please escort Mrs. King out. Do not touch me, she screeched. I am leaving. But you tell Otis. You tell him he is dead. You hear me? He is dead. The line went quiet for a second, then Bill came back on. Mr. King, I am here, Bill. She is gone. She knocked over the pamphlets on the way out. I am sorry about the mess, Bill, I said. Send me the bill. No need, sir. Are you safe, Mr. King? She seemed unstable. I am safer than she is, I said. Thank you, Bill. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking just a little, not from fear, but from adrenaline. It was starting. The facade was cracking. She had lost control in public. She had shown her teeth. Otis, Ruth whispered. Who was that? What is happening? I turned to my wife. I looked at her face lined with worry and age and a lifetime of kindness. I had protected her for 40 years. I had shielded her from the racism on the job sites, from the financial struggles in the early days, from the harshness of the world. But I couldn't shield her. Not anymore. She needed to see. She needed to understand why I was about to destroy our son. Ruth, come here, I said, standing up and holding out my hand. She took it, trusting me as she always did. I led her to the study where my laptop was set up. I pulled out the chair for her. Sit down, Ruth. I have to show you something. She sat looking at the blank screen. Otis, you are scaring me. I know, I said gently, and I am sorry, but you need to see who Chloe really is. You need to see who Jamal has become, because if you don't, you will never forgive me for what I am going to do on Friday. I typed in the password. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't the feed from the restaurant this time. It was a live feed from inside Jamal and Chloe's apartment. I had installed it 6 months ago. Jamal had asked me to help him mount a heavy antique mirror in their living room, a wedding gift from her parents that they claimed was a family heirloom. It was heavy, gaudy, and perfect for hiding a high-definition pinhole camera in the intricate gold frame. I had done it not because I planned to spy, but because even then my gut had told me something was wrong. I was a structural engineer. I noticed stress fractures before the building fell. The camera angle showed their living room, a space filled with modern furniture that looked uncomfortable and expensive. The door flew open. Chloe stormed in. She looked like a hurricane. Her hair was wild, her face red with rage. She threw her designer handbag across the room. It smashed into a vase of white lilies, sending glass and water shattering across the hardwood floor. Jamal followed her in closing the door quickly, as if trying to keep the neighbors from hearing. "Chloe, please," he begged, his voice trembling. "Calm down. What happened at the bank?" Chloe spun around and screamed a sound so raw and hateful it made Ruth jump in her chair. "He played us," she shrieked. "That old black bastard played us. The account is locked, Jamal. Dual consent. He needs a lawyer to sign. He knew we were coming." Jamal looked confused, terrified. "But how? We saw him yesterday. He was selling his tools. He was crying about the crypto scam." "He is losing his mind, Chloe. He is not losing his mind," she yelled, grabbing a decorative bowl from the table and smashing it on the floor. "He is laughing at us. He set a trap. He humiliated me, Jamal." The teller looked at me like I was a criminal. Security escorted me out. Me, a sterling. She paced the room, kicking the shards of glass. "He is mocking me," she hissed. "He thinks he is smart. He thinks because he read a few books he can outsmart us. He is just a laborer, a dirty concrete pourer." Ruth gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. On the screen, Chloe turned on Jamal, her eyes bulging. "And you," she spat, pointing a finger in his face, "you are useless. You said he trusted you. You said he was soft. You said he would do anything for family. I thought he would." Jamal stammered, backing away. "You thought Chloe mocked. You don't think, Jamal. That is why you are a failure. That is why you had to steal from your company. That is why my father owns you. You are weak. Just like your mother." "Don't talk about my mother," Jamal whispered, but there was no fight in him. "Oh, I will talk about her." Chloe laughed, a cruel, manic sound. "Your mother, that pathetic, weak woman, clinging to life just to annoy me." She walked up to Jamal, poking him hard in the chest with every word. "Do you know what I thought when I met her?" she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "I thought finally a quick payout. She looks like she has one foot in the grave already. But no, she hangs on. She takes her little pills and she smiles her stupid smile and she knits those ugly yellow booties for a baby that is never coming." Ruth let out a whimper, a sound of pure heartbreak. I put my arm around her, holding her tight. "She is disgusting," Chloe continued, her face twisted into a sneer. "A dying old black woman sitting in a house she doesn't deserve, sitting on land she is too stupid to sell. I hate her, Jamal. I hate the smell of her house. I hate her voice. I hate the way she touches me with her dry old hands." Ruth crumbled. She didn't scream. She didn't yell. She just collapsed against me, her body going limp. The cruelty was too much. It was one thing to be robbed. It was another to be hated for your very existence, to be hated for your skin, for your age, for your love. "I can't wait for her to die," Chloe said, turning away from Jamal and walking toward the kitchen. "I hope it hurts. I hope she feels every second of it, because she has wasted enough of my time." I slammed the laptop shut, severing the connection. The room fell silent, but Chloe's words still hung in the air like a foul smoke. Ruth was sobbing into my chest, her whole body shaking. "She hates me," she gasped, struggling for air. "Otis, she hates me. She said those things about the baby, about dying." I held her, rocking her back and forth like a child. "I know, baby, I know. I am so sorry you had to see that. But you had to know." "Why?" Ruth cried. "Why is she so evil?" "We gave her everything." "Because she is empty," I said, my voice hard as granite. "Because she has a hole inside her where her soul should be, and she is trying to fill it with our money." I helped Ruth stand up. Her legs were weak. I walked her to the bedroom and helped her lie down. I got a cold washcloth and wiped her face, washing away the tears. "Rest now," I whispered. "Otis," she said, grabbing my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Yes, Ruth." "Friday," she said. Her eyes were red, but they were dry now. The sadness was gone, replaced by a spark of the woman who had marched with me in the '80s, the woman who had stood down a tank. "Friday," she repeated. "What about it?" "Destroy her," she whispered. I looked at my wife, my gentle, loving Ruth, and I saw the steel spine she usually kept hidden. Chloe had made a fatal mistake. She had underestimated Ruth too. I kissed her knuckles. "I will, I promise. I will leave nothing but scorch mark." I walked back into the living room. I looked at the closed laptop. Jamal hadn't defended her, not once. He had stood there and let his wife wish death and pain on the woman who gave him life. That was it. The final thread was cut. I went to the safe and pulled out the file Vance had given me, the deed transfer, the liability clauses. I took a pen and underlined the section on total asset seizure. "You think I am a dirty concrete pourer, Chloe," I said to the empty room. I sat down and watched the sun begin to set, painting the sky the color of a bruise. "You are right. I am. And on Friday I am going to pour a foundation of misery so heavy you will never crawl out from under it." The phone rang again. It was Jamal. I let it ring. I wasn't talking to ghosts anymore. I was only talking to target. Wednesday morning broke with a sky the color of wet concrete, matching the heaviness in my chest that for once I did not have to fake. The game I was playing, the war I was waging, was taking a toll not on my heart but on my soul. I looked at Ruth sitting across the breakfast table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She looked stronger today. The anger had given her a backbone of steel I hadn't seen in years. She knew the plan. She knew what we had to do to close the trap. "I cannot wait until Friday," Ruth said, her voice quiet but firm. "I cannot wait 2 more days, Otis. They are calling the house every hour. Chloe drove by twice this morning, slow like a shark circling a raft. They are desperate." I nodded, taking a bite of dry toast. "They are panicked. The bank incident spooked them. They think I am unstable. They think the money is evaporating. We need to push them over the edge, Ruth. We need to make them reckless." "How?" she asked. I put my toast down. I looked at my hands, steady and strong. "I am going to give them exactly what they want," I said. "They want a tragedy. They want a medical emergency that incapacitates me so they can swoop in with their power of attorney and their vultures. So I am going to give them a heart attack." Ruth's eyes went wide. "Otis, no. That is dangerous. What if they give you something at the hospital? What if—" I reached across the table and covered her hand. "I have it covered. Vance has a contact at St. Jude. Dr. Evans. He is an old combat medic I served with. He knows the drill. He will admit me, he will put on a show, and he will keep me safe. But we need to sell it, Ruth. You need to scream like I am dying." Ruth took a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a second, channeling 40 years of love and fear and anger. When she opened them, they were wet. "I can do that," she whispered. "For you, I can do anything." 10 minutes later, I was on the floor of the kitchen, clutching my chest, knocking a chair over with a clatter that shook the walls. I let my breathing hitch and gasp. I let my eyes roll back. It wasn't hard to act. I just thought about Jamal. I thought about my son stealing from me, and the pain in my chest became very real. Ruth's scream was blood-curdling. It was the sound of a woman watching her world end. She dialed 911, her hands shaking so hard she dropped the phone once. "My husband," she sobbed into the receiver. "He is not breathing right. His chest. Please hurry." The ambulance arrived in 6 minutes. The paramedics were pros, but I played my part. I groaned. I clutched my left arm. I let my body go limp. They loaded me onto the stretcher, the neighbors watching from their porches with hands over their mouths. I saw Mrs. Gable crossing herself. As they loaded me into the back, I grabbed Ruth's hand. "Call them," I wheezed. "Call Jamal. Tell him it is the big one." I watched her nod, tears streaming down her face. She was a better actress than Chloe could ever hope to be because her pain was rooted in love, not greed. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and stabilizing monitors. Dr. Evans met us at the bay. He was a mountain of a man with hands like bear paw. He winked at me once before shouting orders to the nurses. "Get him to room 3, he barked. "No visitors until I say so." Room 3 was private, tucked away in a quiet wing. Evans hooked me up to the monitors, but he set the alarms to silent. "You look good for a dead man, Otis," he grunted, checking my pupil response. "I feel like hell, Doc," I said, sitting up and adjusting the gown. "Good. Keep feeling like hell. Your family is in the waiting room. They beat the ambulance here." I let out a low whistle. "They must have been waiting by the phone. They are making a scene," Evans said, crossing his arm. "The daughter-in-law is crying loud enough to wake the coma patient. The father, the guy in the velvet jacket, he is demanding to see you. He says he has urgent legal matters to discuss with the patient before he passes." "Legal matters?" I chuckled dryly. "Of course he does." Evans looked at me serious. "They have a lawyer with them, Otis. A greasy little man with a briefcase. They are not here to hold your hand." "I know," I said, lying back against the pillows. "Send them in, Doc, but give me 5 minutes. I need to look the part." Evans nodded and dimmed the lights. He adjusted the monitor so the heart rate beep was slow and irregular, a rhythm of a fading life. "Good luck, soldier," he whispered and walked out. I closed my eyes. I slowed my breathing. I visualized my heart as a failing engine, sputtering and coughing. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I let my hands go limp on the sheets. I heard the door open. It wasn't a gentle opening. It was the rush of people who own the place. The smell of expensive perfume and stale cigar smoke filled the sterile room. "Oh, Daddy," Chloe wailed, throwing herself onto the side of the bed. Her hand clutched mine, but there was no warmth in it. It was a check to see if I was cold yet. "Oh, Daddy, please don't leave us." I fluttered my eyelids, opening them just a crack. The room was full. Chloe was clinging to my arm. Jamal stood at the foot of the bed, looking like he was going to vomit. His face was gray, his eyes red. He knew. He knew this was what they wanted, and the guilt was eating him alive. But he didn't speak. He didn't rush to my side. He stayed back, anchored by his shame. Veronica stood by the window, looking at her watch as if my dying was taking too much of her valuable time. And Richard stood right next to my head, looming over me like the angel of death if the angel of death wore a cheap toupee. Beside Richard was a man I didn't know. He was short, sweating, holding a leather briefcase like a shield. "Otis," Richard said, his voice dropping to a somber baritone. "Can you hear me, old friend?" I groaned a low, guttural sound. "Richard," I whispered. "Is that you?" "It is me, Otis. We are all here." "Ruth is outside talking to the doctors." Liar. Ruth was probably being blocked by security on Evan's order. "Otis," Richard continued, leaning closer. "The doctors, they say it doesn't look good. Your heart is very weak." I tried to nod but let my head roll to the side instead. "I am tired," I weak. I know you are. You have worked hard. You deserve to rest. But Otis, before you rest, there is something we need to take care of. For Ruth and for the baby. The baby. The lie that kept on giving. Chloe squeezed my hand harder, digging her nails in. Please, Dad, she sobbed. For the baby. We need to make sure the house is safe. If you go, the courts will tie everything up for years. Ruth will be homeless. The baby will have nowhere to live. I let out a ragged breath. The baby, I murmured. Yes, Richard said, snapping his fingers at the lawyer. We brought the papers, Otis. The ones we talked about. The transfer. Just to keep the assets safe. Until you get better, of course. The lawyer stepped forward, opening the briefcase on the tray table. He pulled out a document. It was thick, bound in blue paper. I just need a signature, Mr. King, the lawyer said, his voice oily. Right here. It grants full stewardship of your estate to your son and his wife. It protects your wife from tax liability. Tax liability. They were making it up as they went along. I can't see, I whispered, blinking my eye. It is dark. You don't need to see, Otis, Richard said. You trust us, don't you? We are family. He took a pen, a heavy gold fountain pen, and forced it into my weak, trembling hand. Just sign, Otis, he urged. Just sign and you can sleep. I felt the cool plastic of the pen. I felt the paper under my hand. I looked at Jamal. He was crying, silent tears streaming down his face. He looked at me and shook his head just slightly. A tiny micro movement. Don't do it. It was the first decent thing he had done in months, but it was too little too late. Richard saw me looking at Jamal. He shot my son a warning glare, a look that promised pain if he interfered. Sign it, Dad. Chloe whispered, her breath hot on my face. Do it for me. Do it for your grandson. I let my hand shake violently. I let the pen hover over the paper. I need water, I rasped. Veronica sighed loudly from the corner. Give him some water, for God's sake. We don't have all day. Chloe grabbed the plastic cup from the table and held the straw to my lip. I took a sip, letting water dribble down my chin. I needed to sell the frailty. I needed them to believe I was 1 foot in the grave. Better, Richard asked. Yes, I whispered. Then sign. He guided my hand to the line. I took a deep breath. I summoned every ounce of acting ability I had learned over 72 years of surviving in a world that wanted to break me. I started to sign. My hand slipped. The pen dragged across the paper, ruining the signature. Damn it, Richard hissed. I can't. I moaned, dropping the pen. I am too weak. Richard picked up the pen and jammed it back into my hand. You are not too weak, he growled, his voice losing the veneer of sympathy. You are going to sign this, Otis. You are going to sign this right now. He leaned in close, so close his nose was almost touching my ear. The smell of scotch and stale tobacco was overpowering. Listen to me, you old fool, he whispered, his voice a venomous hiss that only I could hear. Sign the paper. Sign it and you can die in peace. If you don't, I promise you Ruth will be on the street before your body is cold. I will throw her out myself. I lay there, eyes closed, listening to the threat. He had said it. He had finally said the quiet part out loud. He wasn't just a thief. He was a man who would destroy a widow for a few acres of land. Something clicked in my chest, the last lock falling into place. I opened my eyes. I looked Richard dead in the face. My eyes weren't cloudy anymore. They were clear. They were hard. Help me. Sit up, I whispered. Richard blinked, surprised by the request, but he nodded, eager to get it done. Help him up, he barked at Jamal. Jamal rushed forward and grabbed my other arm, pulling me up against the pillows. I took the pen again. I gripped it tight. I will sign, I said, my voice stronger. For Ruth. Good, Richard said, exhaling. Good man. I put the pen to the paper, but I didn't sign the document they brought. My hand hovered. Wait, I said. What now? Chloe snapped, losing her patience. This isn't the right paper, I said. What do you mean? Richard asked. I told Vance to bring the deed, I said, panting. This is just power of attorney. I want to give you the land. The room went silent. Richard's eyes bulged. The land, he asked, breathless. The industrial land. Yes, I said. I want you to have it all. Vance has the deed in his office. I told him to bring it. Richard looked at the lawyer. Is that possible? The lawyer shrugged. If he wants to transfer a specific deed, that is better than a general power of attorney. It is cleaner, less contestable. Where is Vance? Richard demanded, turning back to me. He is coming. I lied. He should be here. As if on cue, the door opened. But it wasn't Vance. It was Ruth. She had pushed past the security guard, her face streaked with tears, but her head held high. Otis, she cried, running to the bed. Richard stepped back, frustrated. We will wait, he said to Chloe. If he is giving us the land, we wait for Vance. He looked at me with a mixture of greed and contempt. You rest, Otis, he said, patting the cheek with a little too much force. Don't die yet. You have a gift to give. I closed my eyes again, hiding the fire burning. I have a gift, all Richard, I thought. I have a gift that is going to drag you straight to hell. I just needed Vance to walk through that door with the papers I had drafted. The papers that transferred the debt. The papers that looked exactly like a deed, but acted like a prison sentence. I squeezed Ruth's hand. Soon, baby, I whispered. Soon. The vultures settled into the chairs around the room, watching me like hawks watching a dying mouse. They didn't know the mouse was holding the trigger to a trap that would snap their necks. I lay there listening to the beep of the monitor, counting down the seconds until my victory. The air in the hospital room was stale, recycled too many times through the vent, just like the lies Richard Sterling had been feeding me for the past month. I lay there with my eyes half closed, listening to the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. It was a slow, steady sound that stood in stark contrast to the frantic energy radiating from the Sterling family. They were pacing like caged tigers, hungry and agitated, waiting for the keeper to drop the meat. While Richard berated the nurse outside about the delay, I let my mind drift back to a conversation I had with Vance 3 weeks ago. It was a Tuesday, raining hard, the kind of rain that washes the oil off the streets and makes the city smell like wet asphalt. We were sitting in his office, surrounded by stacks of paper. Vance had been digging into Richard's financials, and he had found something interesting. He is not just broke, Otis, Vance had said, tapping a thick file. He is toxic. His debts have been bundled and sold off to a collection agency in Chicago. They are distressed assets, pennies on the dollar. Nobody expects to collect on them, so they are trading his life like junk bond. I had looked at the file. Millions in defaulted commercial loans, personal guarantees on failed ventures in Malaysia, and credit lines maxed out to the limit. Richard Sterling was a walking bankruptcy. Can I buy them? I had asked. Vance had looked at me over the rim of his glasses. Buy the debt. Why? It is worthless paper, Otis. You will never get a dime out of him. I don't want the money, Vance, I had said. I want the leverage. If I own the debt, I own him. I can foreclose. I can seize assets. I can decide when the lights go out. So I did it. I used my shell company K Holdings, the same one I used for my legitimate real estate investments, and I bought every single cent of debt Richard Sterling owed. I bought the mortgage on his rental penthouse. I bought the lien on his car. I bought the personal loans he had taken out to pay for his daughter's wedding dress. For the last 3 weeks, I hadn't just been his in-law. I was his landlord, his banker, and his executioner, and he didn't have a clue. The door to the hospital room swung open, snapping me back to the present. Vance walked in. He looked out of place in the sterile environment, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my first house. He was holding a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. His face was a mask of professional indifference, but when his eyes met mine, I saw a flicker of steel. Mr. King, Vance said, his voice deep and authoritative. I came as soon as I got the call. Richard rushed forward, pushing past Jamal. About time, he barked. We have been waiting. Otis is fading. We need to get this done. Vance ignored him. He walked to the side of my bed and placed the portfolio on the tray table. Otis, he said softly, are you sure about this? I nodded weakly, letting my head loll against the pillow. I am sure, Vance. Give them the land. I want them to have it. Richard's eyes lit up. He was practically vibrating. The land, the industrial plots near the airport. He thought he was about to sign a deed that would make him a king. He thought he was robbing a dying man. Vance opened the portfolio. He pulled out a document bound in heavy blue paper. It looked impressive. It looked official. It had gold seals and thick bond paper. This is the transfer agreement, Vance said, holding it out. It assigns all rights and titles of the King Industrial Estate to the Sterling Family Trust. Richard reached for it, his hands, greedy claws, snatching at the air. Let me see that, he demanded. Vance pulled it back slightly. Standard procedure, Mr. Sterling. My client needs to sign first. And there is a stipulation. What stipulation? Richard snapped. Otis insists that this transfer includes a full assumption of liabilities, Vance said smoothly. Since the land requires environmental cleanup and tax settlements, he wants to ensure his wife Ruth is held harmless. By signing this, you agree to take on all associated financial burdens attached to the King estate. Richard waved his hand dismissively. Fine, fine. Environmental cleanup, taxes, whatever. The land is worth 10 times that. Just give me the pen. He didn't read it. He didn't ask what liabilities meant. He didn't ask to see the schedule of attached debts. If he had, he would have seen that the attached schedule didn't list environmental cleanup fees. It listed the portfolio of debt held by K Holding, the debt I had bought. By signing that document, Richard wasn't just accepting the land. He was accepting personal liability for every single loan I had purchased. He was legally acknowledging that he owed me millions of dollars, and he was putting up every asset he had left as collateral. It was a confession of judgment wrapped in a gift box. Vance handed me the document. I made a show of trying to hold it, my hands shaking violently. I dropped it on the sheets. I can't hold it, I wheezed. Here, Dad, Chloe said, rushing to my side. Let me help you. She held the document steady on the tray table. I looked up at her. She was smiling that predator smile, her eyes fixed on the signature line. She thought she was winning. She thought she was minutes away from being a millionaire. I took the pen Vance offered. It was heavy, cold metal. I signed my name. It was a shaky scrawl, barely legible but legal. Otis J. King. There I whispered, dropping the pen. It is done. Not yet, Vance said. His voice cut through the celebration like a knife. This document requires a witness, a beneficiary witness, someone who accepts the transfer and the term. Richard stepped up, puffed out his chest. I will sign. Sign. I am the head of the trust. Perfect, Vance said. He turned the page. He pointed to a line at the bottom. Sign here, Mr. Sterling, and date it. Richard didn't even look at the text above the line. He didn't see the words, I hereby acknowledge and accept full personal responsibility for all debts listed in Schedule A, owed to K Holdings, and waive all rights to contest future seizure of assets. He just saw the dollar signs in his head. He grabbed the pen from the bedsheet. He bent over the table. Kneel down, Richard, I whispered. He paused, looking at me. What? I want to see you sign, I rasped. I want to see my legacy safe. Richard rolled his eyes, but he dropped to one knee beside the bed, using the tray table as a desk. He looked like he was praying, and in a way he was. He was praying to the god of greed. He signed his name with a flourish. Richard Sterling. He added the date. He stood up, beaming. He looked at the paper, then at me. You did the right thing, Otis, he said, patting my shoulder. You finally did the smart thing. We will take good care of it. Don't you worry. He handed the document to Vance, who slipped it back into the portfolio with a snap that sounded like a gunshot. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, Vance said. The transfer is immediate. Richard turned to Veronica and Chloe. We did it, he mouthed. I closed my eyes, hiding the triumph that was threatening to break through my mask of pain. He had signed his death warrant. He had just voluntarily handed me the legal right to strip him naked and leave him in the street. I looked at Jamal. He was standing by the door, his head down. He hadn't moved. He hadn't tried to stop them. He was a coward to the end. I felt a pang of sorrow, but it was quickly replaced by the cold fire of just, I am tired now, I whispered. Leave. We will let you rest, Richard said, his voice cheerful now, lighter than air. Come on, everyone. Let's go celebrate. Drinks are on me. Drinks are on me, I thought. Everything is on me. Your clothes, your car, your apartment. And starting tomorrow morning, I am calling in the tab. They filed out of the room, leaving a wake of laughter and chatter. Chloe blew me a kiss from the doorway, a mocking gesture that made my blood boil. Bye, Dad, she said. Sleep tight. The door closed. The room fell silent. I opened my eyes. I sat up. I pulled the oxygen tube from my nose and took a deep breath of unfiltered air. Vance stood by the window watching them leave from the parking lot below. He signed it, Vance asked, turning to me. He signed it, I said, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. He didn't even read the header. Vance let out a low whistle. That is a dangerous amount of stupidity, Otis. It is not stupidity, I said, standing up and stretching my back. It is arrogant. He thinks he is untouchable. He thinks I am beneath him. That is why he didn't read it. He couldn't imagine a world where Otis King outsmarted him. I walked over to the closet where my clothes were stored. I started stripping off the hospital gown. So what now, Vance asked. Now we wait, I said, pulling on my work trousers. We let them celebrate. We let them pop the champagne. We let them think they won. And then comes Friday, I said, buttoning my flannel shirt. The party, the big reveal. I walked over to Vance and took the portfolio from his hand. I opened it and looked at Richard's signature. It was bold, looping, confident. You know, Vance, I said, tracing the ink with my thumb. He was right about one thing. What is that? I did give him a gift. I gave him exactly what he deserved. I snapped the portfolio shut. Get the eviction notices ready, Vance. Get the repo men on standby and call the sheriff. I want a deputy at the party on Friday. For what Vance asked. For the grand finale, I said. I walked to the door of the hospital room. I wasn't an invalid anymore. I was the hammer, and the nail was waiting. Let's go home, I said. I have a wife to kiss and a victory to plan. I adjusted the Windsor knot of my silk tie in the hallway mirror, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't see a tired old man looking back at me. I saw Otis King. I saw the man who had overseen the construction of the skyline, not the man who swept the floor. I was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that I hadn't taken out of the plastic since my retirement dinner 10 years ago. It still fit perfectly across the shoulders, tailored for a man who carried weight without buckling. Beside me, Ruth was fastening a pearl necklace that belonged to her grandmother. She wasn't wearing the drab, shapeless housecoats Chloe liked to see her in. She was wearing a crimson dress that hugged her frame, elegant and bold. Her skin wasn't gray anymore. It was glowing. 3 days off the poison pills had done wonders. Her eyes were clear, her hands steady. She looked like the woman I fell in love with at a jazz club in 1974. Ready, baby, I asked, offering her my arm. She took it, her grip firm. I am ready, Otis. Let's go show them we are not dead. We walked out to the truck. I had polished it until the old paint shone under the streetlight. We weren't hiding anymore. Tonight wasn't about deception. It was about revelation. The party was being held at the Sapphire Room, a banquet hall downtown that screamed new money. It was all glass chandeliers and velvet ropes, the kind of place people went to be seen, not to have a good time. Chloe had called it a celebration of life party for me. A belated birthday dinner, she said. But I knew what it really was. It was a victory lap. It was a coronation for her father. They thought they had the deed. They thought they had the assets. They thought I was a senile invalid who would sit in the corner and drool while they toasted to their new fortune. When we pulled up to the valet, the attendant looked at my truck with a sneer, but I tossed him a $20 bill and his attitude adjusted real quick. We walked through the double doors and the noise hit us. It wasn't a family gathering. It was a gala. There were at least 100 people there. I didn't recognize a single soul. They were all friends of the Sterlings, or rather people the Sterlings owed money to or wanted to impress. Men in shiny suits, women with too much surgery holding champagne flutes and laughing that hollow cocktail party laugh. They were celebrating my money. They were drinking my liquor. We stood at the top of the staircase looking down at the crowd. I spotted Richard Sterling immediately. He was in the center of the room holding court. He was wearing a white tuxedo jacket looking like a bad Bond villain. He was gesturing wildly, talking to a group of men who were hanging on his every word. I knew what he was telling them. He was telling them about the industrial land. He was telling them he was back on top. He was probably promising to pay them back with interest by Monday. Chloe was by his side wearing a gold dress that looked like it was made of actual bullion. She was glowing, rubbing her flat stomach, playing the part of the expectant mother to perfection. And then there was Jamal. My son was standing near the bar alone. He was drinking something dark, and he was drinking it fast. He looked miserable. He kept checking his watch, looking at the door like he was hoping the building would catch fire so he could leave. He saw us first. His glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His eyes went wide. He stared at me in the suit. He stared at Ruth in the red dress. He looked like he was seeing ghosts. He nudged Chloe. She turned around, her smile plastered on like a mask. When she saw us, the smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She looked confused. She looked at Ruth specifically. She was expecting a frail, dying woman shuffling in on a walker. She wasn't expecting the Queen of Sheba, but she recovered fast. She was a professional liar after all. She waved frantically and tapped Richard on the shoulder. Richard looked up. His face lit up with a greedy joy. The guest of honor, he shouted, his voice booming over the music. "Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the man of the hour, Mr. Otis King, and his lovely wife, Ruth." The crowd applauded politely, staring up at us. They didn't know who we were. To them, we were just the props in Richard's play. We walked down the stairs. I didn't use the handrail. I kept my back straight, my head high. Ruth walked in step with me, her heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble. Chloe rushed over to meet us at the bottom of the stairs. She went to hug Ruth, but stopped short when she saw the fire in Ruth's eyes. "Mom," she said, her voice pitching high, "you look incredible. I thought you were feeling unwell. I thought you needed rest." Ruth smiled. It was a cold smile. "I am feeling much better, dear," Ruth said. "Amazing what a change in diet can do. I stopped taking those supplements you brought. I think they disagreed with me." Chloe's face went pale. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting to me. "That is wonderful," she stammered. "I am so glad. And Otis, look at you. You cleaned up nicely." I didn't smile. I just looked at her. "We are here, Chloe," I said. "Let's get this over with." Richard pushed past her, grabbing my hand and pumping it. "Otis, you old dog, you look like $1,000,000. He laughed. "And Ruth, stunning. Absolutely stunning. Come, come. I want to introduce you to some people." He dragged us into the center of the room. "This is Mr. Halloway," Richard said, pointing to a man with a nose like a hawk. "He is in logistics. I was just telling him about our new joint venture, the industrial park." Mr. Halloway looked at me down his nose. "Charming," he drawled. "Richard tells me you are quite the land baron, Mr. King, sitting on a gold mine all these years." "I am just a simple man," I said, my voice low. "I just know when to hold and when to fold." Richard laughed nervously. "He is a character, isn't he? A real salt-of-the-earth type." The waiter came by with a tray of appetizers. I saw the caviar. I saw the truffle oil. This party must have cost $20,000. Money Richard didn't have. Money he was spending because he thought he had just inherited an empire. I looked around the room. I saw the hunger in their faces. These people weren't friends. They were sharks circling a fresh kill. Richard was the chum, and he didn't even know it. Jamal finally approached us. He smelled of whiskey. "Mom, Dad," he whispered. "What are you doing here? You shouldn't have come." "We were invited," Ruth said coolly. "It is a party for your father, isn't it?" Jamal looked at me. His eyes were pleading. "Dad, please, just go, before it gets bad." "It is already bad, Jamal," I said. "It is past bad. It is terminal." Richard clinked a spoon against his champagne glass. The sound rang out sharp and clear, silencing the room. The music stopped. A spotlight hit the small stage at the front of the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention," Richard boomed, stepping up to the microphone. Chloe stood next to him, beaming. Veronica was on his other side, looking smug. "Tonight is a special night," Richard continued. "We are here to celebrate not just a birthday, but a legacy. We are here to honor a man who has worked hard his whole life, a man who has decided to entrust his life's work to the next generation." He swept his hand toward me. "Mr. Otis King, a man of few words but great action. Otis has graciously decided to partner with the Sterling Trust to develop a piece of prime real estate that will change the face of this city. It is a partnership of vision and value." There was a round of applause. Richard soaked it up. He looked like he had just won an election. And I want to announce, he added, that as of this week, the Sterling family and the King family are officially united in this venture. We are building the future together. He gestured for me to come up. "Come on up here, Otis. Say a few words. Don't be shy." I looked at Ruth. She nodded. I walked through the crowd. The path cleared for me. I stepped up onto the stage. I took the microphone from Richard's hand. He tried to put his arm around my shoulder, but I stepped away, leaving him grasping at air. I stood there for a moment looking out at the sea of strangers. The lights were bright in my eyes. I looked at Chloe standing in the front row, her hands on her stomach. I looked at Jamal hiding in the back. I looked at Richard, who was grinning like a Cheshire cat waiting for me to validate his lies. I cleared my throat. "Thank you," I said. My voice was deep, steady. It filled the room without effort. "Thank you all for coming tonight. It is quite a turnout. I see a lot of expensive suits. I see a lot of jewelry. It is a beautiful sight." I paused. "Richard says we are building the future. He says we are partners, and he is right. We signed some papers this week. Papers that change everything." Richard nodded encouragingly. "Tell them Otis." I looked down at it. "You know," I said, leaning into the mic, "I have worked in concrete my whole life. I know about foundation. If the foundation is rotten, the house falls down. It doesn't matter how pretty the paint is, it falls." The room went quiet. The smile on Richard's face faltered slightly. "My family, we have been having some foundation problems lately," I continued. "Termites, rot, things eating away at us from the inside." I saw Chloe stiffen. She took a step back. "But tonight," I said, "tonight we fix the foundation. Tonight we clear the rot." I motioned to Ruth. "Ruth, baby, come up here." Ruth walked up the stairs. She stood next to me. She looked strong. She looked healthy. Everyone stared at her. They had heard the rumors Chloe spread. They expected a dying woman. They saw a warrior. "My wife, Ruth," I said, putting my arm around her. "Chloe told you all she was sick. Chloe told you she was dying." I looked directly at Chloe. "She looks pretty alive to me," I said. The murmuring started, uncomfortable shifting. "And speaking of life," I said, "I want to talk about the new life, the grandbaby." Chloe's eyes went wide with panic. She shook her head violently, mouthing, "No, no, don't." I smiled, a cold, hard smile. "My daughter-in-law says she is pregnant," I said. "She says she is giving us an heir. That is why she needed the house. That is why she needed the money." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a speech. But I am a man who likes to verify things I said. I like to inspect the materials before I build. I unfolded the paper. "So today," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous rumble, "today I have a special gift for my daughter-in-law and my in-law." I looked at Richard. "And for you, Richard, I have a gift for you too. You wanted the land. You signed for it. But you forgot one thing about concrete." I paused, letting the tension stretch until it was ready to snap. "It sets hard," I said, "and once you are in it, you can't get out." I signaled to the back of the room. Vance was standing there by the projection booth. He gave me a thumbs up. "Turn it on," I said. The giant screen behind me flickered to life, and the party was over. The screen behind me illuminated the darkened banquet hall with a harsh white light. It was 60 feet wide, a canvas usually reserved for wedding montages and corporate success stories. But tonight it was a mirror reflecting the ugly soul of the Sterling family. The image flickered for a second, settling into the grainy but high-definition feed from the restaurant's security camera. The silence in the room was instant and absolute. It wasn't the polite silence of a crowd listening to a speech. It was the shocked silence of a crowd witnessing a car crash. On the screen, a timestamp ticked away in the corner. 11:15 p.m., the night of the wedding. The image showed the wine cellar of the Gilded Oak, and there she was, Chloe Sterling, the blushing bride, the angel who had just stood next to me, feigning concern for my health. In the video, she was holding the bottle of Chateau Margaux. The sound quality was crystal clear, amplified by the banquet hall's concert-grade speaker. Her laugh echoed off the walls, a shrill, cruel sound that made the guests in the front row flint. "Oops," she giggled on screen, tilting the bottle and pouring the vintage red wine onto the concrete floor. "Put it on Otis's tab." A gasp rippled through the room. I saw Mr. Halloway, the logistics man, drop his champagne flute. It shattered, but nobody looked down. Their eyes were glued to the screen. Then Richard's voice boomed from the speakers, rough and dismissive. "You really think he bought it?" Hook, line, and sinker, Dad. "Video," Chloe replied, her face twisted into a sneer that stripped away every ounce of her beauty. "That old man is so stupid it is almost painful." I looked down at Richard Sterling. He was standing at the foot of the stage, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. The color had drained from his face, leaving him looking like wet dough. He looked at the screen, then at the guests, then at me. He raised a hand as if to stop the projection, but his arm fell uselessly to his side. The video continued, merciless. It played the part where Veronica complained about the smell of my house. It played the part where Richard laughed about incapacitating me. But the moment that broke the room, the moment that turned the shock into horror, was when Chloe started talking about Ruth. "Your mother is a burden," Jamal video, Chloe hissed. "Honestly, if she died of a heart attack next week, it would be the best thing for everyone." I felt Ruth stiffen beside me. I put my arm around her, holding her up. I looked at the crowd. The women who had been fawning over Chloe minutes ago were now looking at her with expressions of pure revulsion. The men who had been shaking Richard's hand were backing away, creating a physical distance between themselves and the monsters on screen. "Think of the money we would save on hospital bills," the video continued. "Think of how much faster we we could get the inheritance. Chloe let out a scream from the floor. It wasn't a scream of denial. It was a scream of rage. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, her hands clawing at her hair. "Turn it off right now. It is fake. It is AI. They made it up, but nobody moved to turn it off." Vance stood by the projector booth, his arms crossed, his face grim. He let it play until the very end, until the moment Jamal walked out and left us to the wolves. The screen went black for a second. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I leaned into the microphone. My voice was calm, cold. "You said she was an angel, Richard?" I said, looking down at him. "You said she was going to take care of us. Is that what you call care? Planning my wife's death to save a few dollars?" Richard stammered, sweat pouring down his face. Otis, please. That was out of context. We were drunk. It was a joke, a bad joke, a joke I repeated. I signaled Vance again. "Well, I have another joke for you," I said. "This one is hilarious. It is about the future. It is about the legacy you are so worried about." The screen flickered again. This time it wasn't a video. It was a document, a medical document. It was blown up to massive proportions so even the people in the back could read the fine print. At the top, it had the logo of a private clinic. In the center, it had Chloe's name and date of birth. And highlighted in bright yellow were the words that tore her final lie to shreds. Procedure bilateral salpingectomy. Date 3 years ago. Status permanent sterilization. The murmur in the room turned into a roar. People were pointing, whispering, reading the words out loud. I looked at Chloe. She had stopped screaming. She was frozen, staring at the screen, her hands still resting unconsciously on her flat stomach. The stomach she had been rubbing all night. The stomach she claimed held my grandson. "Congratulations, daughter-in-law," I said, my voice booming like thunder. "Your baby is growing fat. In fact, it is a medical miracle considering you had your tubes tied 3 years ago." Chloe's knees gave out. She didn't faint, but she sank to the floor, her gold dress pooling around her like molten metal. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with terror. She knew. She knew there was no coming back from this. The pregnancy was the shield that protected her from my wrath, and I had just shattered it. "There is no baby," I said, addressing the crowd. "There never was. It was a lie. A lie designed to get an old man to sign over his home. A lie designed to manipulate a sick woman who just wanted to hold a grandchild before she died." I felt Ruth trembling against me. She wasn't crying. She was staring at Chloe with a look of profound disappointment, a look that was far worse than anger. "You lied to me, Chloe," Ruth whispered into the microphone, her voice trembling but audible. "You let me knit booty. You let me pray for him." Chloe sobbed, burying her face in her hand. And then there was movement in the back of the room, a chaotic, desperate movement. Jamal was running. He wasn't running for the exit. He was running for the stage. He pushed past the stunned guests, knocking over a waiter with a tray of champagne glasses. The crash of breaking glass added to the cacophony, but he didn't stop. He scrambled up the stairs to the stage, panting, sweating, looking like a man whose soul had been set on fire. The security guards moved to intercept him, but I held up a hand. "Let him come," I said. Jamal threw himself at my feet. He didn't stand. He didn't try to explain. He hit his knees with a thud that echoed on the wooden stage. He grabbed the hem of my jacket, his hands shaking so hard they vibrated. "Dad!" He choked out, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot running from his nose. "Dad, please, I am sorry. Oh God, I am so sorry." He buried his face in my shoes. He was sobbing loudly, an ugly guttural sound of total defeat. "I tried to stop them," he wailed. "I swear, Dad, I tried. I told her not to do the pills. I told her it was wrong, but I was scared. They had the file, Dad. They were going to send me to jail." The crowd gasped again. Pills. Jail. The secrets were spilling out like blood from a severed artery. I looked down at my son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, the man I had hoped would be better than me. He looked small. He looked pathetic. I felt a pull in my chest, a desire to reach down and pull him up to tell him it was okay that we fixed. That was the father in. But then I looked at the screen. I saw the date on the medical report. I remembered the night he broke into my safe. I remembered him standing in that wine cellar letting his wife talk about burying his mother. I stepped back. I pulled my jacket from his grip. "Get up, Jamal," I said, my voice ice cold. He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. "Dad, please, forgive. I am your son." I looked out at the audience. I looked at Richard Sterling, who was watching us with horror, not because his son-in-law was begging, but because his plan was unraveling. "You are not my son," I said loud enough for the back row to hear. "My son would have died before he let someone hurt his mother. My son would have taken the jail time before he became a thief." Jamal flinched as if I had slapped him. "You chose your side, Jamal," I said. "You chose the Sterlings. You chose the lie." I pointed to the floor where Chloe was sobbing. "Go to your wife," I said. "She needs you, because nobody else in this room is going to help her." Jamal stayed on his knees, reaching for me again. "Dad, no. Don't do this. I have nowhere to go. They will kill me, Dad. The lenders—" I brushed his hand away with a violent motion. "Then you better start running," I said. I turned my back on him. I put my arm around Ruth and turned her away from the sight of our broken son. "Get him off my stage," I said to the security guards. 2 large men stepped forward and grabbed Jamal by the arm. He went limp, dragging his feet, screaming my name as they hauled him down the stairs toward the exit. Dad, please. I am sorry. sorry." His voice faded as the doors swung shut behind him. The room was deathly silent again. The only sound was Chloe's weeping on the floor and Richard's heavy breathing. I looked at Richard. He was shaking. He looked like a man who was realizing that the ground he stood on was actually a trap door. I wasn't done. Not yet. I looked at Vance. He nodded. The video was the jab. The medical record was the cross. Now it was time for the knockout. I looked at the document Richard had signed in the hospital, the one he thought gave him the land. "You wanted a legacy, Richard," I said into the microphone. "You wanted to build an empire." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the copy of the contract. "Well, congratulations," I said. "You just bought yourself a whole new life." I signaled Vance again. "Show him what he won." Richard Sterling stood in the center of the room, his face turning a shade of purple that matched the velvet ropes outside. The projection screen behind me had gone black, but the image of his daughter's deception was still burned into everyone's retinas. The room was buzzing a low hum of whispers and judgments, but Richard tried to shout over. He lunged toward the stage, his hands balled into fists, shaking with a rage that was born of pure terror. "You crazy old man!" he screamed, his voice cracking under the strain. "You have lost your mind. This is slander. This is defamation of character. I will sue you for everything you have. I will take your house, your truck, and your pension. I will leave you rotting in a cardboard box on the street." He turned to the crowd, arms wide, trying to rally the sharks he called friends. "Don't listen to him," he bellowed. "He is senile. He is confused. That video was doctored. It is deep fake technology. My daughter is a saint. We are victims here. Victims of a demented old man who is jealous of our success." He looked back at me, his eyes bulging. "You made a big mistake, Otis. A huge mistake. You think you can humiliate me in front of my investors. You think you can drag the Sterling name through the mud. I will bury you in litigation. I will bankrupt you. By the time my lawyers are done with you, you will wish you had died in that hospital bed." I stood there calmly, holding the microphone. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I watched him unravel. It was fascinating in a grotesque way, like watching a building collapse in slow motion. He was threatening me with money he didn't have. He was threatening me with power he had already signed away. I waited until he paused to take a breath, until the echo of his threats died down. Then I looked at Vance. "Step up, Vance," I said into the mic. "Explain the law to Mr. Sterling." Vance walked to the center of the stage. He adjusted his glasses and opened a fresh folder. He didn't need a microphone. His voice was projected with the confidence of a man who held a royal flush. "Mr. Sterling," Vance said, his tone conversational, almost bored. "You seem to be under a misapprehension regarding your legal standing. You cannot sue Mr. King." Richard laughed a frantic, hysterical bark. "I can sue anyone I want. I have attorneys on retainer who eat guys like you for breakfast." "No, you don't," Vance corrected him. "You haven't paid your attorneys in 6 months. They dropped you last week. We have the correspondence." Richard froze. "And more importantly," Vance continued, "you cannot sue Mr. King for bankruptcy because you cannot sue your primary creditor." The room went silent again, the kind of silence that comes before a lightning strike. "Creditor," Richard whispered, confused. "What are you talking about? I don't owe him anything. I signed a deal. He gave me the land." Vance shook his head slowly. He pulled a document from the folder. It was the blue-bound contract Richard had signed in the hospital room, the one he thought was the deed transfer. "You signed a transfer agreement, Mr. Sterling," Vance said, holding it up for the room to see. "But you didn't read Schedule A, did you? You were so eager to get your hands on the King Industrial Estate that you didn't look at the liabilities clause." Richard blinked, sweat dripping into his eye. "Liability? What liability?" "Otis said it was taxes, cleanup fee." "Otis said there were attached burdens," Vance said. "And there were. You see, Mr. Sterling, 3 weeks ago, a company called K Holdings purchased a portfolio of distressed debt from a collection agency in Chicago. That portfolio contained $22 million in defaulted loan. Your loan." Richard took a step back, his legs hitting a chair. "K Holdings," he stammered. "I never heard of them." "You have now," Vance said. "Because the sole proprietor of K Holdings is sitting right behind me." Vance pointed at me. "Mr. Otis King is K Holdings," Vance announced. "He owns your mortgage. He owns your business loan. He owns your credit card debt. And when you signed this document in the hospital, you voluntarily assumed personal liability for the entire debt load of the King estate, which we legally merged with K Holdings the day before. You didn't just sign for land, Mr. Sterling. You signed a confession of judgment. You admitted you owe Mr. King everything." Richard looked at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had just realized the parachute he packed was full of silverware. "That means," Vance continued relentlessly, "that Mr. King has the right to immediate asset seizure to satisfy the debt. And since you have defaulted on every payment schedule for the last last year. He exercised that right this morning. Vance checked his watch. At 9 a.m. today, the sheriff's department executed a writ of possession on the penthouse suite at the Sovereign. The locks have been changed. Your belongings have been moved to a storage facility pending auction. You are homeless, Mr. Sterling. A collective gasp went through the crowd. The guests who had been drinking Richard's champagne realized they were drinking on the dime of the man on stage. And the car, Vance added. The Bentley you drove here tonight, the one parked out front, it has been booted. The tow truck is en route. That is Mr. King's car now. Richard grabbed his chest. He made a wheezing sound like a deflating tire. No, he gasped. No, that is not possible. My offshore accounts, Frozen Vance said. By us. We filed an international lien last week. There is nothing left, Richard. You are not a millionaire. You are a pauper with a negative net worth of $20 million. The reality hit him like a physical blow. The empire of lies he had built, the facade of wealth, the arrogance, it all shattered in an instant. He looked around the room looking for an exit, looking for a friend, but nobody moved. Nobody offered him a hand. They were looking at him with the same disdain he had shown me for months. He was broke, and in their world being broke was a sin worse than murder. Beside him, Chloe was standing up trying to process what was happening. She had recovered slightly from the medical reveal, but this was different. This wasn't shame. This was poverty. This was the end of her world. My trust fund, she shrieked, grabbing her father's arm. Dad, what about my trust? You said it was safe. You said it was untouchable. Richard looked at her, his eyes glassy. He couldn't speak. He was gasping for air, clutching his velvet jacket. Vance answered for him. There is no trust, Mrs. King. Your father raided it 5 years ago to pay off a gambling debt in Macau. It has been empty ever since. Chloe stared at Vance, then at her father. Her face went slack. Her eyes rolled back in her head. She didn't sway. She didn't stumble. She dropped like a stone. She hit the floor with a heavy, sickening thud, her gold dress sprawling out around her like a puddle of oil. She had fainted dead away. Panic erupted in the front row. A woman screamed. Someone shouted for water. But Richard didn't look at his daughter. He was focused on his own survival. He was hyperventilating, his hands clawing at his throat. His face was turning gray. My inhaler, he wheezed, falling to his knee. My bag! He looked toward the table where they had been sitting. His bag was there, but he couldn't reach it. He crawled on the expensive carpet, gasping like a fish. Help me! He choked out, reaching a hand toward the crowd. Someone, help! Nobody moved. The people he had tried to impress, the people he had looked down on, they just watched. It was a cruel scene, but it was the justice he had earned. I watched him from the stage. I felt Ruth grip my hand. Otis, she whispered, he is dying. He is having an asthma attack. I said calmly, he won't die. Panic makes it worse. I stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I walked over to the table and picked up his leather bag. I found the inhaler. I walked over to Richard. He was on his hands and knees, looking up at me with terror in his eyes. He thought I was going to let him suffocate. He thought I was like him. I held the inhaler out. Take it, I said. He snatched it from my hand, his fingers trembling. He took a deep puff, then another. His breathing started to slow. The color began to return to his face. He looked up at me, panting. Thank you, he whispered. I didn't answer. I just pointed to the back of the room. The double doors swung open with a bang that silenced the murmur. 6 officers in tactical gear marched in. They weren't regular beat cops. They wore windbreakers that said Economic Crimes Unit. Behind them were 2 uniformed officers carrying handcuffs. Richard Sterling. I asked, looking down at the man on the floor. He nodded slowly, realizing that the inhaler had saved him for a fate worse than death. I didn't call the ambulance, I said. I called the police. The lead officer stepped forward. He held up a warrant. Richard Sterling and Veronica Sterling, he announced, his voice booming. You are under arrest for securities fraud, grand larceny, and wire fraud. Veronica, who had been trying to blend into the curtains, let out a squeak. An officer moved to cuff her. She started screaming, kicking her legs like a child. Do you know who I am? You can't touch me. The officer ignored her, snapping the cuffs on tight. And Chloe King, the lead officer, continued looking at the woman unconscious on the floor. She is out cold, I said, but she is going with you too. What for? Richard rasped, finding his voice. She didn't sign the fraud papers. No, the officer said, looking grim. But we have a toxicology report from the university lab, and we have a recording of her discussing the administration of a controlled substance to a vulnerable adult. He looked at Ruth, standing on the stage, safe and strong. Chloe King is under arrest for the attempted murder of Ruth King via poisoning. Richard slumped back onto his heels. Poisoning, he whispered. He looked at me. He knew they were greedy. He knew they were thieves. But murder, that was a line even he hadn't thought they crossed. I looked at him. You created her, Richard, I said. You taught her that people are just obstacles. You taught her that money is worth more than life. Don't look surprised. This is your legacy. The officers hauled Chloe up. She was groggy, waking up just in time to feel the cold steel on her wrists. She looked around confused until she saw the uniform. Then she started to wail. It wasn't me, she screamed as they dragged her out. It was Jamal. Jamal made me do it. She was still lying, still blaming everyone else. They hauled Richard up. He didn't fight. He looked broken. He looked at me one last time as they led him away. "You won, Otis," he whispered. "You won." I didn't say anything. I just watched them go. The room was empty of the Sterlings now. Just the guests, the waiters, and the silence. I turned to Vance. "Clear the room," I said. "Party is over." Vance nodded and started ushering the stunned guests toward the exit. They left quickly, avoiding my eyes. They knew they had been part of something ugly. I walked back up to the stage. Ruth was waiting for me. She was crying soft tears of relief. "It is done, Otis," she said. I hugged her. I held her tight, feeling her heart beating against my chest. A strong, steady beat. "It is done, Ruth," I said. "We are safe." I looked out at the empty banquet hall. The debris of the party scattered on the table. The champagne was warm. The food was uneaten. We had destroyed them. We had stripped them bare. But as I held my wife, I didn't feel joy. I felt exhaustion. It was the exhaustion of a soldier who has survived the war but knows he can never go back to who he was before. "Let's go home, Ruth," I said. "I am tired of these fancy suits." We walked out of the sapphire room, leaving the wreckage behind us. The night air was cool. My truck was waiting. It was over. But the silence in the cab on the way home was heavy with the ghost of the son I had left behind. The days following the arrest were a blur of flashing lights, news vans parked on my lawn, and the relentless grinding gears of the justice system. I watched it all from my front porch, rocking in my chair with a shotgun leaning against the railing just in case anyone forgot that this property was still mine. The fall of the Sterling family was not quiet. It was a spectacle, a bonfire that the whole city warmed its hands over. Richard and Veronica were denied bail. The judge, a stern woman who had no patience for white-collar predators, looked at the mountain of evidence Vance had compiled and declared them flight risks. I went to the arraignment just to see it. I wanted to see Richard Sterling trading his velvet jacket for an orange jumpsuit. He looked small without his expensive clothes. He looked like what he was, a con man who had run out of road. When they led him away in chains, he didn't look at me. He looked at the floor, defeated by the very system he thought he could buy. But the real firestorm centered on Chloe. The media loves a fallen angel, and they devoured her. The investigation into her background didn't just uncover the fraud, it uncovered the life she had buried deep beneath her fake pedigree. It turned out Chloe Sterling was a stage name. Her real history was written in police reports from Las Vegas and Miami. She hadn't been finishing school in Switzerland like she told Jamal. She had been working as a high-end escort for wealthy men, the kind of men who paid for silence and discretion. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. The headlines were brutal, screaming about the socialite who was actually a girl for hire. It explained everything. It explained the sterilization, which was likely a business decision. It explained her desperation to land a husband like Jamal, someone naive enough to believe the fairy tale, someone with a family estate she could bleed dry to pay off her own debts to the agencies that owned her. The humiliation was absolute. The woman who had sneered at my wife for being simple, who had mocked my work boots, was exposed as a fraud in front of the entire world. She wasn't just going to prison, she was going into social exile. I didn't feel happy about it. I didn't feel joy watching her mugshot flash on the television screen, her makeup smeared and her eyes dead. I just felt a cold satisfaction that the truth had finally burned through the lie. She had tried to kill my wife to maintain her lifestyle. Now she had neither. Then there was Jamal. My son had spent 3 nights in a holding cell. I had let him sit there. I let him feel the cold, concrete bench and listen to the sounds of men who had lost their way. I wanted him to taste the reality of the path he had chosen. I wanted him to understand that actions have consequences that daddy cannot fix with a check. On the 4th morning, I drove to the county jail. I didn't go to the visitation room. I went to the release desk. I had made a deal with the district attorney. I used every favor. I had every connection from my years in construction and city planning. I traded my reputation for his freedom. I convinced them that Jamal was a pawn, a victim of coercion and blackmail. I showed them the evidence that Richard was holding the embezzlement file over his head. They agreed to drop the charges against him in exchange for his testimony against the Sterling. He was free, but he wasn't innocent. I waited by the heavy metal doors, my truck idling at the curb. When Jamal walked out, he looked like a ghost. His clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven, his eyes hollow. He held a plastic bag with his personal effects, his wallet, his keys, his phone. He looked around, blinking in the sunlight, looking for a taxi, looking for a friend. He saw my truck. He stopped. He walked over, slowly dragging his feet. He opened the passenger door and got in. He didn't say a word. He just stared out the windshield, his hands trembling in his lap. I put the truck in gear and drove. I didn't drive home. I drove toward the interstate heading south. "Where are we going?" Jamal asked, his voice a cracked whisper. "We are going to the Greyhound station," I said. He flinched. He looked at me, his eyes filling with panic. "The bus station." "Why?" "Dad, I want to go home. I want to see Mom." "You don't have a home," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. "And you are not seeing your mother. Not today. Not for a long time." "But I am free," he pleaded. "They let me go. You fixed it right. You saved me." I gripped the steering wheel tight. "I saved you from prison, Jamal. I didn't save you from me." I pulled up to the curb at the station. It was a grim place, smelling of diesel fumes and old cigarettes. People were rushing around with bags, looking tired, looking for a way out. It was a place for beginnings and endings. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope. I tossed it onto his lap. "Open it," I said. Jamal opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside there was a ticket and $500 in cash. 20s mostly. Working man's money. "One way to Birmingham," I said. "Birmingham?" he asked, his voice rising in hysteria. "Why Birmingham? I don't know anyone in Birmingham." "Exactly," I said. "You don't know anyone. Nobody knows you. Nobody knows you are a thief. Nobody knows you tried to kill your mother. You have a clean slate." "Dad, please," he cried, reaching for my arm. "Don't do this. I have nothing. My job, my car, my wife, it is all gone." I pulled my arm away. "You lost your job when you stole from it. You lost your car when you signed it over to a fraud. And you lost your wife when the police dragged her away for attempted murder. You stripped yourself bare, Jamal. I am just giving you a chance to put some clothes back on." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had loved so much it hurt. "I have a friend in Birmingham," I said, my voice thick with emotion I couldn't hide. "He runs a construction crew. Roofing. Hard work. Hot work." I called him. "He is expecting you on Monday morning at 6 a.m. You show up, you work, you keep your mouth shut, and you learn what it means to earn $1. Jamal stared at the money in his lap. "Roofing," he whispered. "Dad, I have a degree. I am a manager." "You were a manager," I corrected him. "Now you are a laborer, just like I was, just like the man you looked down on." I unlocked the door. "Get out," I said. He didn't move. He sat there, crying silent tears rolling down his face. "Dad, will I ever see you again?" I looked out the window at the gray concrete of the station. "That depends on you," I said. "You what?" "Don't call me next week. Don't call me next month. Don't call me when you run out of money. If you call asking for help, I will hang up." I turned to face him one last time. "You come back when you are a man, Jamal. You come back when you have paid your debt, when you have built something with your own hand, when you can look me in the eye without shame. Until then, you are dead to us." Jamal nodded slowly. He understood. It was the hardest thing I had ever said, but it was the only way to save him. The boy he was had to die so the man could be born. He opened the door and stepped out onto the curb. He stood there clutching the envelope and his plastic bag of belonging. He looked small and alone. "I love you, Pop," he whispered. I didn't answer. I put the truck in gear and pulled away. I watched him in the rearview mirror until he was just a speck in the distance. Only then did I let the tears fall. I cried for the miles between us. I cried for the empty room in my house. I cried because cutting off a limb to save the body is the most painful surgery a father can perform. The drive back to the house was the longest of my life. The house was quiet when I arrived. Ruth was sitting on the porch swing, wrapped in a shawl, staring at the empty driveway where Jamal's Porsche used to be. The tow truck had taken it days ago. I walked up the steps and sat down beside her. I didn't have to say anything. She saw my face. She knew. "He is gone," she asked, her voice trembling. "He is gone, Ruth. I sent him away." She let out a long, shuddering breath and leaned her head on my shoulder. She cried softly, wetting my shirt with her grief. She didn't fight me on it. She didn't ask me to bring him back. She knew. She had seen the video. She had felt the betrayal in her own heart. She knew that the son we raised had been replaced by a stranger and that the only way to get him back was to let him break completely. "Did you give him the money?" she asked after a while. "500, I said. "And a job." "That is good," she whispered. "That is more than he deserves, but he is our boy." "He was our boy," I said, putting my arm around her. "Now he has to decide if he wants to be our son again." We sat there as the sun went down, watching the shadows lengthen across the lawn. The house was safe. The land was safe. The predators were in cages, but the victory felt hollow. We had won the war, but we were left standing in the ruin. Ruth reached out and took my hand. Her grip was strong, warm, alive. "You saved me, Otis," she said, looking up at me. "You saved my life." I looked at her, at the lines in her face that I had loved for 40 years. "I would burn the world for you, Ruth," I said. "You know that." "I know," she said. "And now we have to heal, just the two of us, like it was in the beginning." I nodded, like it was in the beginning. We sat in the silence, two survivors on a porch in Atlanta, holding hands while the world turned. I had lost a son, but I had kept my honor. I had kept my wife. And as the stars began to come out one by one, I realized that was enough. It had to be enough, because I was Otis King, and I had cleared the rot. Now it was time to rebuild. The sun sets differently out here in the country. In the city, the light gets chopped up by the skyline, broken into jagged pieces by glass and steel. But out here on the porch of our new farmhouse, the sun goes down whole, painting the sky in wide, uninterrupted strokes of purple and gold. It is quiet. The only sound is the crickets tuning up for the evening and the gentle clinking of Ruth's spoon against her teacup. We moved 3 months after the trial. We sold the house in Atlanta. It was a good house built on a solid foundation, but it was haunted. Every room held a memory of a lie. The kitchen where Chloe poisoned my wife. The living room where Jamal tried to rob my safe. The driveway where I sold my tools tools to fool a fool. We couldn't live there anymore. We needed fresh air. We needed land that hadn't been poisoned by greed. So we bought this place. 40 acres of rolling green hills 2 hours north of the city. It is simple. It is honest. Ruth has a garden 3 times the size of the old one, and she spends her mornings talking to her tomatoes and her evenings watching the firefly. She looks 10 years younger. Her heartbeat is steady, strong, and rhythmic, just like the season. I didn't keep the money from the Sterling liquidation. I didn't want it. It felt dirty. I took the millions I made from selling the industrial land to the logistics company, and I did what I should have done years ago. I invested in the future, but not my biological future. I walked into the local high school last month and sat down with the principal. I told him I wanted to start a fund, the Otis and Ruth King Scholarship for Future Builder. It is for kids like I used to be. Black kids from the wrong side of the tracks who have good hands and sharp minds but empty pockets. Kids who want to be engineers, architects, and foremen. I pay for their tuition, I buy their books, and I buy their work boots. I met the first recipient last week, a young man named Marcus. He looked me in the eye when he shook my hand. He had calluses on his palm. He thanked me not for the money, but for the chance. That is a legacy. That is something that won't try to kill you in your sleep. People ask me if I am lonely. They ask if I miss the noise of a big family, the Sunday dinners, the laughter, and I tell them the truth. Yes, the silence can be heavy sometimes. There is an empty chair at our table where Jamal should be sitting with a grandchild on his knee. That ache never goes away completely. It is a phantom pain like a limb that has been severed. But then I remember the alternative. I remember the fear. I remember wondering if the tea my wife was drinking was going to stop her heart. I remember looking at my son and seeing a stranger who was waiting for me to die. There is a peace in knowing who is sitting across from you. There is a comfort in knowing that the person sharing your silence would never betray you. I would rather be lonely in a house built on truth than surrounded by a family built on lie. I still get updates on Jamal. Vance sends me reports even though I tell him not to. My son is still in Birmingham. He is still working on that roofing crew. The foreman tells Vance that Jamal is the first one on the site and the last one to leave. He has lost 20 pounds. He looks tired. He looks old. But he hasn't called me for money. He hasn't asked for a bailout. He is paying his rent. He is buying his own food. Maybe he is becoming a man. Maybe the fire is burning away the rot. I don't know if I will ever see him again. I don't know if I can ever trust him again. But I know I gave him the only thing that could save him. I gave him the bottom. I look over at Ruth. She is dozing in her rocking chair, a blanket pulled up to her chin. She is safe. She is breathing. She is mine. I take a sip of my tea. It is hot and sweet. I lost a son. It is a tragedy that no father should have to endure. But I found something I had almost lost along the way. I found my dignity. I found my spine. I stood up when the world told me to lie down and die. I am Otis King. I am 72 years old. I drive a truck. I wear work boots, and I sleep soundly every single night. The sun dips below the horizon, leaving us in the twilight. I reach out and take Ruth's hand. She stirs and squeezes my fingers. "We are okay, Otis," she whispers. "Yes, Ruth," I say. "We are okay." We sit there, 2 old trees with deep roots weathering the storm and still standing. The house is quiet. The land is quiet. And in that silence, I finally find the victory I was looking for. Family isn't defined by blood, but by behavior. We spend our lives building castles for our children, hoping they'll be our shelter in the storm. But when the storm comes, some children only want to sell the brick. I learned that true love protects, but it also disciplines. Cutting off a toxic limb is painful, but necessary to save the body. Never let your love for someone blind you to their lack of respect for you. Dignity is the one asset you must never sign away. So that is my story. I tore down a house of lies to build a foundation of truth. Now I want to hear from you. If you think I was too hard on Jamal, or if you think he got exactly what he deserved, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, would you have given him the money for the bus ticket, or would you have left him in that jail cell? I read every comment because I know there are a lot of people out there fighting their own wars. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your foundation strong.